this lad was cast from, the pinnacle of a structure. His existence was never uncomplicated. He encountered Florishan, and ultimately found themselves reincarnated as Attilla, in a realm where sorcerers governed all. Attilla lacked even a trace of enchantment. Currently, as a savage disoriented in the heart of the woods, he needed to endure against creatures 5 times the size of a bear. Thus, he took the sole action available to him. He grasped his hatchet and commenced battling up to 10 days thereafter. His physique had grown remarkably powerful. That is not even a bear could harm him any longer. A system notification reveals that the main character of the situation, Charles Einhard, has been located. Upon perceiving this, an individual promptly confronts him to a duel. To Charles, this appears to be utter irresponsibility. Nonetheless, his adversary counters that it is nothing short of bravery. Assuredly, he proclaims that he will overcome him and traverse the route of the ruler. Shortly thereafter, a system window characterizes Charles Einhard as the most formidable fighter in history. As the contender gets ready to commence, an alert emerges, disclosing that he is the initial creator, now reborn as a mere background character. Subsequently, they both surge ahead, their blades colliding forcefully. The force of the impact fractures the earth surrounding them. In a rapid motion, the individual springs into the air to perform an assault. Nevertheless, the descending blow is intercepted by his adversary's sword. Subsequently, he descends some distance off. Serenely, Charles declares that he has already committed that maneuver to memory. He subsequently elevates his own blade, bracing himself to retaliate. Subsequently, he delivers a blow that slices through the atmosphere towards his adversary. The power of the collision propels his adversary rearward. Without a moment's pause, Charles springs and plunges with his blade for a fresh assault. The man is cast to the earth by the overwhelming force of the strike. Nevertheless, the adversary contorts his physique and lunges forward to strike once more. The weapon impacts his opponent squarely in the torso. Resolutely, Charles proclaims that this marks the conclusion. He subsequently readies himself to administer the decisive strike. The assault penetrates the man's torso and propels him into the sky. At that instant, a colossal surge of energy cascades from the sky towards him. The impact triggers a tremendous blast, stirring a newfound strength. At the heart of the collision, the individual endures, adorned in injuries. In the setting, an individual attired in formal wear requests Mr. Sato Shota to endorse the agreement. Presenting himself as Sato Shota, he articulates that he is an author who attained extraordinary triumph with his complimentary 400-chapter saga. He is the creator of the epic tale of the monarch. With that endorsement, his creation would ultimately be transformed into a game. Consequently, all his endeavors thus far would ultimately be acknowledged. At that, he readies himself to endorse the document in front of him. Assured, he is confident that a promising future lies ahead. Nevertheless, that was merely what he perceived, until he abruptly discovered himself tumbling. A voice remarks that he likely cannot grasp the reasons behind this occurrence, departing, leaving him bewildered on the ground. At the perimeter of the structure, the gentleman from the office counsels him not to internalize it. He subsequently asserts that this is entirely for Sato Shota's benefit. In a state of desperation, Sato implores for rescue, exclaiming that he is plummeting. Ultimately, the man merely comments, "That's an awful statement to make." Sato then questions whether he truly expressed that audibly. Abruptly, the man's visage contorts as he clarifies that he simply perceived his thoughts. At that instant, the author comprehends that the entity in front of him is not of human origin. Instantly afterward, the unknown individual's foot descends and tramples fiercely on the hand Sato had grasped on the edge. A cry erupts as his digits are compressed. In anguish, he wonders whether this marks the conclusion of his existence. He then cries out that he still desires to extend his life. His gaze ascends toward the individual at the pinnacle of the structure. At that moment, a force radiates from his physique. The unleashed energy fractures the earth in his vicinity. A tremendous burst of power engulfs the whole terrain. Amidst the debris, he ponders what this signifies. Observing the metropolis ablaze, he wonders whether he was the one responsible for all of this. Drifting. Over him, the individual inquires whether he harbored berserker and the power of ferocity. Shortly thereafter, the silhouette's hand extends toward him. As he remains poised in midair, The outsider remarks on his remarkable strength. He subsequently asserts that with this power, Sato will now encounter a fresh existence. As his visage starts to fracture, he proclaims that this will unfold in the realm the author himself fashioned. He subsequently releases him, expressing that they shall encounter one another once more. The descent causes him to tumble downwards, in the direction of an active volcano. He subsequently crashes onto the earth with a forceful collision. Gazing at the scenery ahead of him, he wonders whether any of this is genuine. Shortly thereafter, a system window greets him to the realm of the valiant narrative of the monarch. Confronted with this, he ponders whether this is the realm from his own narrative. He subsequently pivots, detecting motion emanating from the woods. Gripped. In a state of alarm, Sato begins to flee frantically from a bear. The creature lifts its limb, prepared to attack. Without a moment's pause, he asserts that he has no desire to perish in this location. At that instant, he notices a hatchet resting on the earth. He swiftly seizes the armament and advances toward the creature. The bear growls and readies itself to strike. The strike connects precisely with the creature's skull. The being tumbles forcefully to the earth, utterly vanquished. Gazing at the fallen bear, he ponders what in the world is happening. At last, gazing at his own form, he inquires aloud, "What on earth is this?" He had been propelled from a structure by an enigmatic individual. As a result, he found himself cast into the realm of the narrative he had authored. Moreover, his physique had progressed to a distinctly superhuman standard. At that instant, he starts to recognize his impeccably conditioned biceps. He also takes note of his more powerful chest and thoroughly delineated midsection. He then inquires about the prominent muscles covering his entire physique. Nevertheless, that was not the sole aspect that had transformed. His perceptions were more acute than ever. For a brief instant, he inhales the atmosphere surrounding him. He identifies the identical savage aroma from earlier. Nonetheless, he recognizes that on this occasion, there is more than just one. Considering the circumstances, he concludes that it is prudent to leave the location. Abruptly, a shriek emanating from the woods seizes his focus. As he approaches, observes numerous corpses strewn across the earth amidst the foliage. A woman examines the surroundings, coming to the grim realization that all her associates have perished, while 4 bears wander nearby. Shortly thereafter, subsequently, the creatures notice her concealed behind a tree. She inadvertently treads on a branch that breaks beneath her foot. One of the bears pivots its gaze toward her, and she gazes in return. Subsequently, one of the beings lunges forward to assault her. The woman prepares for the collision, clutching her tools firmly. Nevertheless, she acknowledges that she could perish in this place, expressing that she desires to avoid this conclusion. In that moment, Sato abruptly materializes and delivers a blow. His fist collides with the bear's muzzle with tremendous power. Taken aback, through his own extraordinary power, he gazes at his palm and subsequently inquires if she is all right. The woman, still bewildered, inquires whether he is Attilla. Perplexed, he gazes at the silhouette crouched in front of him and utters the name Attilla once more. She observes that they claimed Attilla had perished, but swiftly cautions him to glance over his shoulder. 3 remaining bears are sprinting towards him. As he pivots to confront them, he inquires about the quantity of adversaries. Frantically, she shouts that he cannot confront them all. With a subtle grin, he casually inquires whether he truly cannot. The creatures bellow as they progress. This compels him to discover whether it is accurate, prompting him to prepare himself for battle. Gallantly advancing, he assaults one of the beings. A blow strikes the initial bear as he begins to tally. Without pause, he springs towards the second creature. A strike impacts the second creature, and the tally persists. The initial pair of bears has already collapsed onto the earth. He subsequently delivers a strike at the final surviving bear. The third creature is cast against a stone as the tally concludes. Firmly establishing his stance, he brandishes the hatchet, accompanied by a solitary action. He executes an accurate blow. A bear's foot is entirely detached. The lady observes, incapable of responding. He subsequently lunges ahead and assaults the remaining beings. At last, he positions himself beside the remains of the final bear. He subsequently inquires who on earth this Attilla she is referring to is. Without warning, the woman rushes toward him and embraces him. She expresses that she had faith he would return unscathed. The embrace takes him utterly off guard. Without releasing her grip, she declares that everyone in the hamlet will be joyful, and presses him to hasten so they can depart. At that instant, a system window reveals the profile of the character Attilla, aged 16. Promptly thereafter, Attila's recollections start to inundate his thoughts. The memories originate from a far-off era. They advance towards the final recollection preceding demise. He starts to analyze all the fresh data. Within the recollections, he uncovers that Attilla perished during a bear hunt, a ceremonial transition into manhood, orchestrated by a malevolent scheme. The visage of the individual accountable for the treachery is distinctly evident. He becomes aware that he has been reborn as a barbarian side character, expressing regret that he did not become the main hero. The lady inquires about the issue, but he comforts her by stating that he is all right. He subsequently observes the injuries on her leg. Bending down, he instructs her to climb onto his back so they can make their way back to the settlement. She cautions him that the hamlet is 20 kilometers distant, yet he maintains that it's not an issue and that he cannot abandon her there. At last, he lifts her onto his back and begins sprinting rapidly towards the settlement. Within a verdant gorge, Attilla springs from the edge of a precipice. Throughout the rapid plunge, he even succeeds in obtaining a piece of fruit from a tree. Immediately afterwards, he observes that it has an exquisite flavor. He presents his partner with a portion, yet she merely declines. They both reach a gorge where the encampment of the Black Wolf tribe is situated. Two members of the tribe are astonished, as they were convinced that Attilla had perished at the hands of a bear. Enveloped by the crowd, he meticulously examines the surroundings and proclaims that it's astonishing. Everything surrounding him precisely corresponds to the illustrations that were previously created. The scenery in front of him is nothing short of the realm of the Black Wolf clan itself. Confronting the townsfolk, he asserts that this is the most profound honor an author could possibly attain. A commanding figure strides through the throng and shouts Attila's name. In front of him is his father. The renowned fighter is believed to have single-handedly vanquished a force of 5,000 soldiers. Munzuk, leader of the Black Wolf clan, gazes at him with intense scrutiny. He subsequently inquires whether his son has anything to express to the group. Resolutely, Attilla proclaims that he has returned. The chieftain envelops him in a firm embrace. With tears glistening in his eyes, Munzuk embraces his son. The lad is rendered utterly voiceless by the spectacle. Stirred, Munzuk proclaims that he has returned to existence, precisely as the ancient oracle had predicted. He subsequently exclaims that the myth of the Black Wolf was authentic, and confidently declares that he is elated. The leader subsequently declares a grand banquet to commemorate the occasion, assuring abundant sustenance and beverages until they can consume no further. During the nighttime, the clan congregates around a blazing fire, indulging in a banquet, and raising their glasses in honor of the formidable deity of warfare. Attilla dines with pleasure, remarking that he could consume endlessly. At that moment, an individual presents him with a cup of beverage, which he gratefully accepts without a second thought. The backdrop, the clan's fighters perform a dance, while others beat on percussion instruments. The performance symbolizes the myth of the formidable deity of warfare. The narrative recounts how the famed champion met his demise at the hands of his adversaries, merely to resurrect from demise. A performer brandishes a hatchet, maneuvering with remarkable dexterity. She twirls and accomplishes every gesture with accuracy. With a rapid twirl, the choreography escalates further. Soon after, the show concludes. Consequently, the myth of the protector who safeguarded the settlement emerges. The inhabitants rejoice with revitalized fervor. While observing the festivity, he contemplates that if this genuinely represents the realm of his narrative, there exists solely a singular path to return to the tangible realm. That solitary exit is the Enchanted Realm. It is the location where the most influential sorcery practitioners reside, since that is where he positioned the excerpt. Attilla savors a morsel of flesh. At that instant, a gentleman advances and declares that he learned Attilla vanquished 4 bears. Blida, a fighter from the Black Wolf clan, commends him for the remarkable accomplishment. He then notifies him that he has now joined the prestigious combatant faction. For an individual hailing from the Black Wolf clan, this is the utmost conceivable privilege, and also a prerequisite to attain the role of chief. Consequently, Blida extends an invitation for him to raise a glass. Simultaneously with the toast, a fierce contest for dominance quietly commences. Attilla halts the cup in mid-flight as he detects an unusual aroma. Observing. In this moment, Blida inquires about his troubles and the reason behind his lack of drinking. Directly to the matter, Attilla asserts its superior, to cease conversing and simply engage in combat. Blida responds that it has been some time, and playfully remarks that he has acquired the ability to express intriguing thoughts. He cautions him not to become overconfident, since he remains unaware of the tactics that were employed. Blida subsequently remarks that the celebration has only commenced, and the evening ought to be embraced to its maximum potential. Attilla requests that he remain patient, yet the fighter merely bids farewell and departs with his companions. Beside the campfire, a hare is undergoing preparation for the feast. A young lad advances and informs Chief Munzuk that he was the one who pursued the creature. The chieftain grins and declares that the boy is destined to become a formidable warrior. He is entirely distinct from his younger sibling, Blida. Lacking the experience of having a father, the youthful individual is uncertain about how to behave in this circumstance. Had he been raised with one, he envisions he would have communicated and garnered accolades in a similar manner. Abruptly, Munzuk beckons him nearer. He then reveals that he has a gift for him. The leader subsequently bestows upon him the insignia of the distinguished fighter, conferred solely to those who have vanquished 3 or more bears in one expedition. Munzuk inquires whether he is rendered voiceless, and remarks that it is a privilege for any fighter to sacrifice their life for. He subsequently hurried him to don the insignia. Attilla attempts to fasten the belt, but realizes he's never performed that action previously. Clumsily, he remains positioned there, with the ribbon fastened in an unusual manner. Munzuk inquires about the issue, and he clarifies that he has injured his hand slightly and is unable to position it correctly. Upon hearing this, the chief volunteers to secure it for him. While modifying the window frame, he remarks that this evokes memories of the day they initially encountered one another. The knot is flawlessly positioned around his waist. Munzuk rises and remarks that Attilla has matured significantly and put in great effort to reach this point. The youth merely expresses his gratitude to him. The leader subsequently rests a hand upon his crown, messing with his hair gently. He states he ought to exhibit more happiness. However, Attilla responds that he experiences a sense of shame. Munzuk exclaims that there is no cause for embarrassment, as achieving the status of an elite warrior at 16 is unprecedented. The remaining members of the tribe begin to motivate him to commemorate. Attilla beams at all the acclaim. Munzuk lifts his cup and suggests a toast to the valiant fighters of the Black Wolf. All the males of the clan elevate their tankards in jubilation. The young man raises his glass in unison with them, contemplating that perhaps this existence isn't so dreadful after all. Unexpectedly, a man's cup is hurled from his grasp as he emits a shriek. Attilla cries out fervently for his father. In that moment, the leader of the tribe is unveiled, utterly changed. He ponders whether the beverage was tainted, yet Munzuk's sake emits no unusual odor. A young man clutches his father and repeatedly shouts for him, yet the sole reply is a powerful growl. Munzuk persists in bellowing, utterly unrestrained. An examination discloses that he is influenced by an uncontrollable rage. The leader of the clan commences to assault his own community. In that instant, Attilla comprehends that Blade's objective extended beyond merely Munzuk. The townsfolk dash and cry out urgently for assistance. The true objective was to eliminate all those who held the tribe's leader, Attilla, in high regard. Proclaims it's inexcusable to employ Munzuk's own hands to harm the individuals he cherishes the most. Munzuk lunges ahead recklessly. The youth challenges him, pleading for him to awaken. While he attempts to prevent him, he's struck by an exceptionally forceful blow. He collapses onto the earth, coming to the conclusion that it's futile to continue attempting. His father is unable to perceive him. Nonetheless, Attilla rises, exclaiming that this cannot be authentic. Munzuk bellows as his metamorphosis reaches its culmination. He subsequently strikes with a formidable blow. The strike makes contact with the earth, propelling him through the air from the strength of the collision. Attilla understands that he is unable to halt him with his present strength. As the thunderous cries reverberate, the townspeople retreat in fear. A young boy dashes towards his mother, who has collapsed to the earth. He nudges her, pleading for her to rise. The mother urges her child to proceed forward. Munzuk advances toward the pair. She shouts for him to dash as swiftly as possible. The young lad subsequently seizes a hatchet from the earth. As he spins around, he proclaims his intention to safeguard his mother. The clan's leader readies to assault the youth. At that moment, Attilla materializes before them, intercepting the strike with his own limb. He commends the lad's bravery, and the lad refers to him as sibling. He subsequently shouts for the others to handle them. The clansmen transport the mother and her child away from peril. Attilla pivots and successfully intercepts yet another of Munzuk's blows. In that instant, he understands that merely halting him was an oversimplified notion. The clan's leader prepares for yet another assault. He propels himself ahead with great velocity, brushing against Attila's visage. The strike slices through his ear. Munzuk launches yet another savage assault. The blow strikes directly on the young man's flank. Attilla expels blood and realizes there is no longer any justification for delay. He seizes his father's arm, cognizant that there exists but a single choice. The young man steels himself and resolves to battle. The pair confront one another, poised for the encounter. Munzuk fees, and Attilla retaliates with an immediate strike. A formidable strike impacts Attila's visage. In reply, he counterattacks with a strike to the leader's jaw, which also connects. A brutal uppercut jabs his head backward. Nevertheless, Attilla advances with a swift barrage of strikes. The strikes impact Munzuk's torso, yet they prove ineffective. Understands it won't suffice to defeat him. Munzuk readies for another offensive. An instant later, the two engage in a rapid succession of strikes. Attilla is forcefully propelled to the earth. The clan members observe the spectacle, utterly astonished. Clearing his throat, he attempts to rise. Propelling himself from the earth, he battles to regain his breath. A dark wolf champion is an individual who jeopardizes their own existence to safeguard what is valuable to them. And that was precisely what Munzuk had consistently represented. Attilla recalls that his father would have safeguarded the townspeople, even at the expense of his own existence. With this notion, he rises to his feet and triggers the Valorous Power ability. The youth rushes forward against Munzuk. A formidable headbutt impacts the leader squarely in the torso. The force propels one of Munzuk's teeth into the air. The tribal leader's body is propelled backward by the impact of the assault. The tooth drops and adheres to the earth. Fatigued, Attilla stumbles rearward. A short while later, he collapses to the earth, questioning whether this is the conclusion. Munzuk continues to stand as the metamorphosis starts to diminish. From the earth, Attilla observes him, utterly astonished. Munzuk gazes at his own hands and inquires about what is occurring. Attilla stays on the floor, pondering whether his father has awakened. A system display verifies that Munzuk has emerged from his fury condition. Upon witnessing this, he comprehends that his father has genuinely reverted to his usual self. His stare then settles on an item positioned before him. It was the pin that had been cast previously. Munzuk dashes over to him and inquires if he is all right. Attilla responds that he can endure for the time being. Abruptly, the clan's leader swiftly races in a different direction. Bleda and his companions are retreating on horseback through the woodland. The wrathful dart conjured by the sorceress was not expected to be eliminated by a straightforward headbutt. Nonetheless, it was removed by the unique ability that Attilla possesses. Bleda urges his steed to accelerate their getaway. Prior to vanishing, he advises Attilla to relish his moment of valor, as it will all come to an end the following day. The party persists in their journey toward the northern cave. At the threshold, Bleda instructs his troops to move forward. They venture into the shadowy cavern, illuminating the path with a torch. Abruptly, a bellow reverberates from the abyss, causing them to shudder. A voice insists they restore what was seized. In front of them, a colossal bound creature roars for them to bring back its young. The celestial creature of the Black Wolf clan, the woodland catastrophe, bellows with great ferocity. Bleda addresses the being, referring to it by its designation. The creature commands them to hush, labeling them as timid. Single. One of the men grasps a tiny cub, menacingly poised to end its life. The tiny creature cowers in his embrace. The mother implores them to cease. Bleda subsequently commands the beast to venture forth and annihilate the Black Wolf clan. The woodland disaster bellows in reaction to the directive. Attilla stirs awake in a cot and raises himself, grasping his head, his form shrouded in wrappings. He contemplates whether he lost consciousness. Next to him, Munzuk is similarly reclined and acknowledges him for rousing, causing him to pivot in astonishment. The young gentleman inquires whether his father is well. Munzuk responds that his physique remains immobile for the time being, but reassures him not to be concerned. Reclining on his back, the leader claims he perceived it all and feels profoundly remorseful. Attilla responds that he is not to blame, but rather that scoundrel Bleda is. Nonetheless, Munzuk maintains that he did not succeed in safeguarding the inhabitants. He subsequently announces that he no longer possesses the credentials to serve as the leader of the tribe. Attilla inquires of him, asserting that this is precisely what Bleda desires. Nonetheless, his father urges him to comprehend, asserting that the situation was exceedingly grave. Abruptly, cries reverberate from beyond the entrance. A throng of locals storms into the chamber. One individual shouts for restraint, asserting that the leader is still recuperating. Another blames someone for proposing the visit. The debate persists regarding which fool introduced sake when visiting an ailing individual. The lady whom Attilla rescued arrives alongside her child and comforts him, stating that due to his actions, everyone is safe. She asserts they have been safeguarded by the leader in numerous confrontations. She subsequently states that everyone is aware of how deeply he holds the villagers in esteem, and that they have faith in him. With tears glistening in her eyes, she implores him to have faith in them, for they place their trust in their leader. Munzuk shields his visage with his palm. The clansmen elevate their fists and proclaim their commitment to safeguarding the Black Wolf tribe collectively. With his visage drenched in tears, he merely expresses his gratitude to them. Abruptly, an individual bursts into the chamber. The individual halts in front of the crowd and shouts for their attention. He proclaims that the woodland disaster is assaulting the hamlet. The village can be observed engulfed in flames, facing devastation. In the midst of the blaze, the woodland disaster rages uncontrollably. The disaster of the woodland was the mythical celestial creature that, together with the formidable warrior monarch, safeguarded the Black Wolf clan. This is the reason the inhabitants of Black Wolf Village referred to it with profound respect. Abruptly, a gentleman hurries in and requests the focus of the crowd. He subsequently declares that the disaster of the woodland is assaulting the hamlet. Munzuk rises in his bed, perplexed, and wonders about what he has just perceived. Attilla stands beside the bed and declares his intention to leave, but his father halts him. He cautions him that it's foolhardy, as a mortal is no equivalent to a celestial creature. Nevertheless, the young man advances towards an axe and states that he intends to lend it. Clutching the armament, he vows to restore it. Prior to his departure, he requests that they hold on for him. Beyond, the beast's bellow reverberates ominously. One of the individuals gestures towards the creature, and Attilla pivots to confront it. Observing the spectacle, he remarks on the creature's colossal dimensions. At that moment, Bleda and his companions emerge, remarking that he is delayed. He inquires whether Attilla genuinely believed they would pause for everyone to recuperate. The youth subsequently calls out Bleda's name. In reply, he claims Attilla is gullible, much like his progenitor. Preparing his axe, the youth confronts him to engage in combat, rather than merely conversing. Bleda commends his valor, asserting that it befits the illustrious warrior monarch's reincarnation. Nevertheless, he discloses that he will not be the adversary, and raises his hand to issue a directive. The being's paw impacts the earth with force. Attilla deflects the strike with his hatchet. The catastrophe of the woodland looms behind Bleda, anticipating his directive. Perplexed, the young man inquires how a celestial creature can adhere to his commands. Bleda clarifies that causing an adversary to submit is straightforward. In his view, one must simply seize what is most valuable, as he possesses a young bear. The mythical celestial creature was diminished to this condition following the capture of its offspring. For that which ought to be safeguarded transforms into a vulnerability. Attilla inquires whether he has completed delivering his final remarks. Bleda responds, inquiring whether those are the youth's ultimate remarks. He subsequently gestures and commands the disaster from the woods to assault. Attilla promptly readies himself for battle. The beast approaches and strikes with its claw. He deflects the strike with the axe's grip. At that moment, he understands that the circumstances are highly disadvantageous. He realizes that if he endures a direct strike, he will be overwhelmed. The creature strikes once more, and Attilla is propelled backwards by the force. Nevertheless, he succeeds in touching down, although he's pulled by the power of the assault. The youth observes the velocity of that immense form, solid as stone and impervious to standard cutting tools. As the being draws nearer, he contemplates his course of action. Then he recalls that although one cannot sever a stone, you can still insert something into it. If the blade fails to slice, then the remedy is to integrate it. Bearing this in consideration, he prepares a hatchet and places it strategically. Subsequently, he wields the second axe to hit the first with all his strength. The collision drives the weapon deeply into the being's flesh. The celestial creature responds to the impact that strikes its shoulder. Attilla readies for another assault. The being gazes at him with unwavering focus. He delivers a precise strike to the creature's paw. Immediately thereafter, he rotates his physique to generate momentum. Subsequently, he springs into the sky for a forceful assault. The hatchet impacts the being's shoulder with utmost strength. The sword penetrates profoundly into the creature's skin. One of the individuals becomes aware that he is employing one axe to drive in the other. Following numerous strikes to its limb, the being ultimately crumples entirely. The disaster of the woodland draws near to its young, which is positioned on the earth. Blida refers to it as a worthless bear. Subsequently, he commands his troops to launch their projectiles. The marksmen pull back their bows and focus their sights. A barrage of bolts hurtles toward Attilla. He readies himself to intercept the missiles. Using his hatchet, he parries every projectile heading towards him. One of the individuals refers to him as a beast. With his head detached, the same individual cries out for his comrades to escape. Attilla rushes towards Blida's forces, assailing them without reluctance. Shortly thereafter, he delivers the concluding strike on the final adversary. Consequently, he conquers all of Blida's warriors, wielding nothing but his axes. He subsequently faces Blida and dares him to a duel between the pair of them. Ultimately, Blida embraces the challenge and summons him to combat. Blida lunges at Attilla, commencing the assault. Several individuals observe that the pair are merely gazing at one another, completely still. Nevertheless, one individual rectifies him, asserting that the conflict might have commenced without their awareness. Consequently, commences the clash that will determine the destiny of the Black Wolf clan. Attilla stands resolute in his combat position. Conversely, Blida remains motionless, gripping his axe firmly. Abruptly, he strides ahead. In a heartbeat, he disappears, leaving Attilla puzzled by the unexpected vanishing act. He subsequently materializes behind him to launch an assault. Continuously, he initiates yet another assault that grazes Attila's shoulder. Taken aback, he inquires about the nature of that maneuver. Blida. Accusations once more, and Attilla recognizes that he cannot evade swiftly enough. He then mocks him, questioning whether he truly believed he could triumph solely through raw strength, labeling him a simpleton. He subsequently asserts that he is accustomed to confronting awkward assaults that rely solely on brute force. Attilla protects himself to the best of his ability and recognizes the expertise of his adversary. The flurry of strikes forces him to retreat. He cannot discover any opportunity, not even to wield his axe. Blida commends him for successfully fending off his onslaught of rapid-fire strikes. Nevertheless, he gets ready for his subsequent action. With a sudden acceleration, he propels himself ahead once more. Attilla responds to the abrupt motion. At that instant, Blida proclaims that he will emerge victorious. Vaulting over him, he delivers an accurate blow. In skill and expertise, Blida evidently excels beyond him. Nevertheless, Attilla readies himself for a retaliatory strike. He recalls that this setback was trivial in comparison to Munzuk's. Capitalizing on an ideal opportunity, he resolves to launch an assault. With accuracy, he strikes Blida with the shaft of his axe. The strike connects solidly, causing him to expel blood. A few individuals begin to rejoice, exclaiming that Attilla has triumphed. He continues to stand, seemingly triumphant. Reclining on the earth, Blida starts to chuckle. Attilla inquires what is amusing. Amidst chuckles, he responds that it was finally time for the impact to manifest, departing, leaving him bewildered. He subsequently discloses that his axe was entirely covered in berserker venom. He then inquires whether Attilla is aware of the consequences when an individual is struck by that instrument. Enraged, Attilla berates him as an illegitimate child. Blida gestures towards him and proclaims that Attilla himself shall be the one to obliterate the Black Wolf tribe. The youth gazes at his own palm. Bewildered by the current situation, he senses an unusual sensation flowing within him. Shortly thereafter, he begins to yell as a force entirely surrounds him. Blida calls out for him to transform into a creature and meet a wretched demise. Attilla senses his physique becoming extraordinarily warm. Perplexed, he inquires about the unfolding events. In that moment, the celestial creature bows before him and addresses him as Attilla, the individual who embodies the essence of avarice. Astonished, he inquires whether the celestial creature is capable of speech. It illustrates that he can now perceive its voice distinctly, as he is nearer to becoming a creature than a man. The being subsequently unveils its maw and instructs him to accept this. Attilla observes a blade, emerges in his grasp. The celestial creature reveals that this is the sacred blade of the illustrious martial king, bestowed upon the individual who conquers it, known as Michiel. It indicates that the armament will assist in his emergence when the essence of the Black Wolf tribe reverberates, inspiring him to battle. Ultimately, it compels him to battle for those he is obligated to safeguard. A notification panel emerges, detailing the characteristics of the armament known as Michiel. The haze surrounding Attilla gradually fades away as he confronts Blida. The individuals observe, perplexed by the unfolding events. Blida contemplates why his adversary is remaining stationary. In reply, Attilla merely utters his name. He then proclaims it is moment to resolve this conflict. In the flash of a moment, Attilla darts ahead and disappears from view. Before Blida has the chance to respond, a gash emerges on his visage. Subsequent to the labor action, Attilla descends gracefully onto the earth. Subsequently, Blida is hit once more, wailing that it's unfeasible. The blade is embedded in his shoulder. He fixates on the weapon lodged within his own flesh. Identifying the armament, he inquires whether it is the Michiel. Without allowing him a moment to respond, Attilla strikes the decisive hit. The force propels Blida rearward. He collapses face first, vanquished in a pool of his own crimson. In that moment, he ultimately realizes that Attilla was acknowledged by the celestial creature, in contrast to himself. The globe has perpetually been inequitable, and he entered life as the sibling of a gifted individual. Consequently, he led his existence perpetually measured against Munzuk. Nonetheless, he was propelled by the longing to reach the sibling he held in such high esteem. He sought to conquer the chaos that caused him to bleed from his mouth. Nonetheless, in the course of a particular confrontation, everything changed direction. Munzuk, the mightiest combatant of the Black Wolves, was annihilating foes relentlessly. Blida would reprimand him for rushing in solo, yet his sibling would merely express remorse for becoming overly enthusiastic. Subsequently, he would lament upon witnessing him confront everyone by himself once more. Nonetheless, Munzuk continued to battle in the core of the battleground. Abruptly, Blida notices an unfamiliar adversary nearing. Frantically, he dashes, calling out for his sibling. A foe readies to assault Munzuk from the rear. Blida ultimately takes a blow to the face as Munzuk shouts his name. Injured while safeguarding him during the conflict, he kneels before his sibling and inquires. Blida challenges him, questioning why he is unable to participate in the upcoming conflict, despite his significant contributions. Munzuk merely expresses regret. He clarifies that due to his wounded vision, Blida is unable to engage in combat on the battlefield. Instead of acknowledgement, his position was removed from him. A herald proclaims a fresh onslaught, prompting Munzuk to ready himself for departure. In that instant, Blida comprehends that he was the sole individual who thought they were united in their struggle. He exclaims that his sibling could never comprehend his anguish and torment, and maintains that he is not the antagonist. In his thoughts, Munzuk, who forsook him and the Black Wolf tribe, is the true perpetrator. Fueled by this conviction, he rises and pledges to annihilate everything. He rushes ahead, shouting for anyone not to obstruct him. Attilla confronts him and commands him to cease uttering whatever he desires. He subsequently insists that Blida assume accountability for his own deeds. Ready to proceed, Attilla proclaims that he will not allow an individual like himself to escape unscathed. Ultimately, he declares that he will not permit Blida to harm his loved ones or his allies once more. He then springs toward him, exclaiming that he will not allow him to injure anyone else. The pair gaze into each other's eyes as they rush towards one another. Blida and Attilla collide in the Sky Inn, a formidable clash. Attilla administers the decisive strike, colliding with him directly. At that moment, he realizes that fundamentally, all had been a generosity towards him. Nevertheless, his sole desire was that his sibling had informed him they would battle side by side. Blida reminisces about the moments they battled alongside one another, reminiscent of times past. The onlookers, observing from afar, comprehend that the battle has concluded. The conflict concludes with Blida's demise, and tranquility returns to the hamlet. Subsequently, he resolves to depart, resolved to attain the enchanted domain. Attilla bids farewell, declaring that he is departing at this moment. One of the individuals challenges his choice, while another expresses sorrow, suggesting they would be secure indefinitely if he were to assume the position of chief. Munzuk, however, asserts that, regrettably, Attilla is unable to fulfill that responsibility. The inhabitants express dissent, asserting that this is false, and that he would perform exceptionally well. Munzuk subsequently declares that he will demonstrate the reason. Perplexed, the individuals observe as he prepares his armament. Abruptly, Munzuk lunges forward with his hatchet. Taken aback by the unforeseen assault, Attilla responds promptly. He successfully deflects his own father's strike. Perplexed, he inquires about his actions. Munzuk commends him, stating that his protection was exceptional. Nevertheless, he indicates that his position is vulnerable and rife with gaps. Attilla stays quiet, failing to grasp the circumstances. Munzuk asserts that he undoubtedly possesses a unique ability. He subsequently proclaims that the blade assigned to him is evidence that a remarkable fate lies ahead. Munzuk elucidates that individual spirits are evaluated when they encounter hopelessness, and that Blida extinguished the illumination within his own spirit. Thus, he suggests that he refine his intellect, skills, physique, and spirit, akin to metal, shaped countless times. Ultimately, he advises him to always preserve the brilliance of his spirit, regardless of the circumstances. Attilla shouts to his father and concurs with his statements. Munzuk subsequently instructs his son to come back without delay. At that instant, a lady called Eriku emerges in his way. She advances, proclaiming that this is a vow. Abruptly, she adorns him with an object around his neck, catching him off guard. Eriku embraces him while securing the talisman. The artifact is crafted from the tooth of the celestial creature. She asserts that it will undoubtedly safeguard him. Attilla expresses her gratitude, deeply touched. Munzuk sprints towards him and embraces him, pleading for him to stay. In the far expanse, Attilla takes his leave of his kin, who observe him from the entrance of the village. Subsequently, he establishes a campsite, solitary, in the shadowy woodland. Perched beside the flames, he observes that the meat is cooking beautifully. He grabs the steaming morsel and exclaims that it appears to be delectable. Subsequently, he readies himself to savor the initial morsel. Nevertheless, he halts upon hearing a noise emanating from the woods. He pivots and gazes into the shadows among the trees. Attilla then inquires about the duration of their pursuit. At that instant, the petite offspring of the celestial creature appears from the shadows. Attilla gazes into the shadows and inquires how long they have been trailing him. The diminutive offspring of the celestial creature cautiously emerges from behind a tree. Serenely, he simply requests the being to return home. The young bear rests on the earth as Attilla observes it quietly. He subsequently clarifies that he cannot carry it along and requests it to behave well and return to its abode. Suddenly, the tiny being's belly growls, and its gaze shifts to the flesh in his grasp. Witnessing this, Attilla concedes and presents the sustenance, instructing it to consume and then depart. The young bear clamps down on the flesh and declines to release its grip, being oscillated from one side to the other. Shortly thereafter, the being drifts into a deep slumber, clutching the morsel of flesh. Attilla comprehends that the cub has taken his entire share. He refers to it as ferocious, notwithstanding its adorable facade, and chooses to forsake it. As he pivots, but abruptly halts upon perceiving something peculiar and inquires about its nature. The cub ejects an item, causing, Attilla exclaimed in astonishment. He requests the being not to frighten him in such a manner, as it presents him with a branch. Perplexed, Attilla inquires whether it is a present, and subsequently shouts that he has no use for it. Nevertheless, the small cub cuddles in his lap, prompting him to ponder why it is so bonded. He subsequently contemplates whether the being detects its mother's scent on him. It was the identical cub Blida had employed as a pawn. The celestial creature battled with its very existence to safeguard it. That is the reason Attilla was reluctant to embark on such a perilous expedition. He gazes at the young animal dozing in his lap and contemplates the predicament as a significant issue. Abruptly, the tiny being reclines beside the blade. At that instant, he recalls that the cub is likewise a sentinel creature, tethered to the safeguarding of the armament. The sun ascends, announcing the arrival of a fresh day. The tiny being raises itself and surveys its surroundings. It then becomes apparent that Attilla is absent. Terrified, it dashes in the direction he departed. Subsequent to a handful of paces, it halts abruptly, appearing disoriented. Shortly thereafter, the cub begins to whimper. Attilla seems to grasp the sword and inquires if that is what it had been searching for. He clarifies that he is unable to provide it to the cub. Instead, he rips off a fragment of his own dressing. He subsequently fastens the fabric around the cub's neck, Attilla remarks that it is a present. Subsequently, he pivots to depart and beckons for it to accompany him. Prior to departing, he cautions that he will abandon it if it fails to comply. The young bear dashes and brushes against his limb. Before long, it begins to joyfully trail behind him along the trail. Attilla cautions that the subsequent meal will not occur until they arrive at the next settlement. Subsequently, he motivates it to sprint. The two of them journey together along a mountainous path. From afar, a lady observes their expedition through a sphere and observes that the setting is captivating. She characterizes him as an untamed and tenacious fighter, able to shatter an enchanted toxic dart. The sorceress, Batri. Elizabeth ponders where an individual so extraordinary has been concealed. Ultimately, she expresses that she is now significantly intrigued by him. Attilla proclaims their arrival. Before him lies the initial metropolis of their expedition. They step into an inn where the tiny being promptly begins to dine, seated upon a stool. Attilla cautions against consuming that, his tone imbued with worry. At that moment, the innkeeper presents an enormous signature meal, expressing regret for the holdup. A significant quantity of steamed buns is positioned on the table. Attilla seizes a roll, takes a mouthful, and inquires of the gentleman whether he is familiar with the enchanted realm. The innkeeper responds that he is unfamiliar with it, and Attilla remarks that he anticipated such a reaction. The enchanted haven is a buoyant isle, a current in the northern ocean of the Kuriel-Sharudra landmass. He takes a drink and comments that it was something he had solely inscribed in his book. He subsequently remarks that he ought to have elaborated more thoroughly. The innkeeper is astonished that he has already completed his meal. Attilla is aware that to arrive at the North Sea, he must navigate through a particular location. Territories teeming with creatures, such as colossal beings and fire-breathing serpents, lie in wait for him along his journey. In addition to that, he will also confront the malevolent beings residing outside those areas. Contemplating all of this, he places a hand on his forehead, lamenting an abrupt ache. At a different table, an individual reiterates the inquiry regarding the realm of fairies. Immediately afterward, he and his companions begin to chuckle. As one of them inquires about Attila's age, one of the individuals rises and exclaims that a fairy kingdom does not exist. In a derisive manner, he advises Attila to cease fantasizing and confront the truth. Attila icily responds that it is not his concern. He subsequently rises and commands the individual to depart immediately. The intoxicated individual menaces him, proclaiming that if he doesn't expedite his actions, he will transform the diminutive being into soup. In retaliation, the being sinks its teeth into his finger, forcefully. Attila simply reassures them not to fret, asserting that he's merely a tipsy individual. Abruptly, a different man strikes the table, propelling the inebriated individual into the air. Attila and the innkeeper shift their attention to the stranger. Otto, the chief of the Curie Mercenary faction, observes that beverages become unpalatable in the presence of particular individuals. The innkeeper appears horrified by his mere presence. He subsequently advises Attila that it would be wise to depart swiftly. Perplexed, Attila ponders why that evening is so ungracious. Subsequently, the innkeeper discloses that he is Otto, renowned as the Ogre Blade. Attila grins at the revelation that he is a renegade who once served as a knight. Otto responds tersely that he is not obligated to provide anyone with an elucidation. At that instant, the individuals accompanying the inebriated individual hasten to assault Attila. His stare locks onto the advancing adversaries. In an instant, they are all cast to the earth, surrounding him. Otto is astonished by the events that have just unfolded. Upon witnessing the defeat of his comrades, he inquires about the identity of Attila. With a grin, Attila responds that he is the primary creator. He subsequently tears his own shirt and declares that it is his time now. Otto becomes frantic and urges him to hold on for a moment. The individuals crouch on the ground and start to express their regrets. Attila withdraws, asserting it was merely an act of self-defense. Attempting to rationalize his actions, he claims he had no alternative since he was assaulted initially. At that moment, the innkeeper seizes his hands in gratitude, leaving him perplexed. Attila grabs a wanted poster and inquires if those individuals are offenders. The innkeeper affirms, detailing that the nobleman authorized a decree against them, and the entire community had endured the consequences of their actions. He subsequently muses why the directive insisted they be apprehended unscathed. The individual then conjectures that possibly the objective was to enlist them for the conflict. He refers to having heard whispers of an impending confrontation, noting that the regional forces are outnumbered by their adversaries. Consequently, Baron Bertrand is assembling anyone at hand as a fighting contingent, including offenders. Attilla grins upon hearing this and remarks that it's positive news. A brief while later, they reach the residence of the local nobleman. Within the chamber, an individual inquires whether Attilla was the one who apprehended the outlaws in return for a war steed. The aristocrat who welcomes them presents himself as Lord Bertrand. Bending down, the young man verifies that it is indeed accurate. He further mentions that he also arrived to collect the monetary prize for the apprehension of the group. Lord Bertrand reprimands him for speaking as though a conflict were imminent in Gascony. Attilla, nonetheless, responds with composure that he is merely readying himself for battle. Upon this, the sovereign inquires about the source of such intelligence. Attilla discloses he has encountered speculation regarding the deficiency of troops, and deduces that they are all being assembled for a clash with the Achates in the east. He subsequently explains that this is the rationale behind the absence of marauders or a patrol unit in the community. The aristocrat is briefly rendered mute by the conclusion. Attilla persists, stating that the sovereign desired them apprehended unharmed, as he thought they would prove beneficial in combat. Bertrand commends his perception. The youth reciprocates the praise, asserting that within the uncivilized tribes, the title Hound of the Southern Mountain is emblematic of dread, able to instill dread and evoke tears. Evidently pleased, Lord Bertrand comments, which even the savages are aware of his existence. At that instant, Attilla concedes that it was a fabrication, yet emphasizes that it would be a privilege to assist him and attain a recompense. Bertrand pauses briefly and concedes that apprehending the complete Kiri mercenary faction merits acknowledgement. Thus, he presents 10 golden coins and a war steed of his preference, garnering prompt gratitude. Nevertheless, the aristocrat states that there is a single stipulation. Reaching out his hand, he asserts that if Attilla genuinely desires to assist him, he must enlist in the conflict with Gasconu's troops. Otto and his companions are astonished by the suggestion. Attilla, conversely, concurs without doubt, asserting he anticipated those exact phrases. The choice to enter the conflict was determined by one sole motive. It was essential to compel that individual to take action. The individual was Charles Einhard. He was the central figure of the narrative, recognized by his adversaries as the deity of mortality, and solely he was acquainted with the fairy monarch. In the castle courtyard, military preparations proceed at a consistent rhythm. Confined within the cell, Otto converses with Attilla as the remaining inmates observe in quietude. Without warning, he cries out in anguish, imploring Attilla to extricate them from the situation. Attila responds with composure, pointing out that he is being excessively noisy, and requests that he refrain from addressing him as boss, as he is merely 16 years old. The disclosure regarding his age leaves Otto utterly bewildered. When he inquires whether the accurate age isn't 46, he faces a threat, prompting him to apologize without delay. Otto contends that should they refrain from participating in the conflict, they will all face execution. Attilla, nonetheless, asserts that this will not occur. He merely instructs them to engage in the battle silently, and they shall be rescued. The commander of the mercenaries pauses briefly, gazing through the cell bars. Then, he suggests that they resolve all matters in a head-to-head combat. Attilla is perplexed by the suggestion of a solitary duel. A joust is a straightforward contest. It's a clash between two knights, with all stakes involved. The guidelines may differ, yet one remains constant. The most powerful prevail, irrespective of standing. The victor claims everything, whereas the defeated forfeits all. Otto discloses that he was formerly a knight, and that, although he may not prevail in a physical confrontation, he would stand a better chance engaging in combat mounted on a horse with a lance. In the initial narrative, he was merely a secondary figure who would perish without even being acknowledged by Duke Gascony's forces. Attila's emergence in this realm is beginning to alter the narrative, and it would pose a dilemma if Otto were to perish at this point. Thus, to involve the Kiri mercenary faction in the conflict, Attila chooses to embrace the offer. He proclaims that should he emerge victorious, they will all participate in the conflict. If Otto prevails, he will liberate them in accordance with his agreement with Bertrand. With a serene grin, Attila embraces the challenge. Hired soldiers call out to their leader, expressing that they are entrusting their lives to him. Otto confronts the circumstance earnestly, whereas Attila stays composed. 10 days afterward, on the occasion of the tournament, the two knights assume their stances in the arena. An announcer greets the nobles, gentlewomen, and visitors present. The audience in the bleachers rejoices at the commencement of the occasion. Lord Bertrand observes everything keenly from his vantage point. The messenger proclaims that the conflict will be for all the marbles, and requests a thunderous ovation. He subsequently clarifies that all are aware of the regulations as the knights prepare their spears. They must rush vehemently towards each other. The two confront each other from opposing ends of the arena. The sole guideline is to engage solely with their spears. The individual who unseats their adversary from their steed will emerge victorious. For these esteemed warriors, societal standing possesses no significance. It's a battle in which solely the robust emerge victorious and claim everything. The announcer pivots towards the exhilarated audience. He then proclaims that the confrontation is imminent. With a grave motion, he indicates for the fighters to proceed. Otto, referred to as the Demon Blade, gallops into the Colosseum upon his steed. A few individuals in the assembly yell for his demise. A woman seated close by remarks that he appears to be rather disliked. One of the individuals pivots to respond, yet is startled. The cloaked lady merely places a finger to her mouth, requesting quietude. The sorceress, Bathory Erzsébet, observes that she is indifferent, as her sole purpose for visiting was to see young Attilla. The men who were previously vocal are now utterly captivated by her. Subsequently, the announcer proclaims the forthcoming contender arriving from the west. He presents Attilla, the savage fighter of indeterminate might, who independently apprehended the entire Kyrie mercenary faction. The confined mercenaries cry out for their leader to triumph, as their existence hinges on it. Otto perceives the cheers of encouragement and displays evident discomfort. From across the arena, Attilla simply yells his name. He subsequently remarks that the armor appears quite decent on him. Otto responds that he can presently only indulge in arrogance. The messenger proclaims that the eagerly anticipated instant has at last come. He presents Attilla from the Onyx Wolf clan, battling against Otto, the Infernal Blade. At last, the messenger commences the contest. The announcer expresses gratitude to the spectators for their perseverance. He subsequently showcases the confrontation between Otto, the Infernal Blade, and the savage fighter, Attilla. With the flourish of a banner, the contest officially commences. Otto lunges ahead with his spear poised for action. Simultaneously, Attilla advances towards his adversary. With his gaze locked on the objective, Otto is confident that he can triumph. An instant later, he initiates his onslaught with the spear. Attilla bends over his steed, observing the point of the spear shift perilously near to his visage. Otto is utterly astounded by his rival's behavior. The hired soldiers in the bleachers contemplate whether he truly grasped the spear with his unprotected hands. Serenely, Attilla states he will merely counter the assault. A spear proficiency ability is triggered. He subsequently whirls the armament and lunges it back in Otto's direction. Otto observes the point of the spear approaching rapidly. Subsequently, Attilla assaults him with the opposite end of the armament. The force causes Otto to expel blood. He collapses onto his steed due to the impact of the strike. Bathory. Elizabeth beams as she observes the confrontation. She remarks that he is genuinely a frenzied fighter, a true berserker. Attilla shatters the spear, and the herald proclaims that the fighter from the Black Wolf clan has triumphed in the initial round. Shortly thereafter, they both get ready for the subsequent round. Presently, Otto brandishes an enormous battle mallet. He recognizes that the circumstances are not advantageous for him. The announcer proclaims the commencement of the second phase. Attilla gallops ahead on his steed, traversing the expanse of the arena. He resolves to conclude everything by unseating his adversary from their steed. With this consideration, he propels himself rapidly toward Otto. His adversary also approaches the encounter on horseback. The hired soldiers call out their leader's name. The battle mallet is hurled, whirling through the atmosphere. Otto observes the armament draw near. At that instant, Bathory clicks her fingers. She grins, elevating her forefinger. Abruptly, a power surges from the ground of the arena. Attilla and Otto are apprehended unexpectedly by the disruption. Attila's steed rears back, alarmed. He pivots and glances towards the audience, seeking the origin of the occurrence. Then he focuses his attention on Bathory Erzsébet. She simply gazes at him in silence. The hired warriors and the diminutive being exclaim that the steed is spiraling out of control. Otto is convinced he has been rescued and perceives his opportunity. Attilla discards what remains of the spear. Otto comprehends that the strike was unsuccessful, but holds the conviction that he can attempt once more. In that instant, Attilla experiences a sudden inspiration. He effortlessly vaults off his steed towards his adversary. Otto is utterly bewildered by the maneuver. Attilla descends onto the adversary's steed directly behind him. He subsequently seizes him by the throat. The announcer exclaims, astonished that he leaped onto his adversary's steed. He inquires whether that is permitted by the regulations of the tournament. Lord Bertrand merely observes the spectacle with a subtle grin. Attilla proclaims that with this, the subsequent round belongs to him. The steed persists in galloping wildly throughout the arena and rises up with both of them upon its back. Irritated that the circumstances are recurring, Attilla restrains Otto. Suddenly, with a lurch, the steed bucked them off and he touched down on his feet. Otto, conversely, collapses abruptly onto the arena ground. His individuals and the tiny being shriek, comprehending the gravity of the predicament. Attila's. The steed rushes recklessly towards the prostrate Otto. Bathory Ersebet observes the spectacle with keen interest. In the meantime, Attilla situates himself close to his adversary. With a singular term, he commands her to cease. Otto's steed becomes startled and flees from Attilla. In the crowd, everyone observes the spectacle in quietude. Among them is Bathory Elizabeth, who watches from afar. Attilla plunges his formidable blade into the earth, beside the remnants of his adversary's armament. Otto, the infernal blade, stays poised in a kneeling position before him. Then, Attilla reaches out his hand and inquires if this is the third round. Otto gazes at him for a brief instant prior to responding. He agrees to the assistance in rising and indicates that they can proceed. The announcer of the tournament proclaims that the moment has arrived for the ultimate, conclusive bout between the two chevaliers. Bathory Elizabeth observes that he caught sight of her minor ruse, finding it entertaining. In front of the crowded auditorium, the herald expresses gratitude to all for their understanding during the minor occurrence. He subsequently proclaims that from this point forward, the battle will be conducted on foot. With the fighters in place, he proclaims that there are no regulations and any armament is permitted. With a straightforward hand motion, the cue for the ultimate confrontation is conveyed. Attilla lunges ahead and strikes, yet Otto successfully evades. In retaliation, he delivers a forceful strike with his armament. Otto evaluates that his adversary's assaults are intense, with each strike delivering tremendous power, steeling himself. He deduces he merely needs to evade the initial strike. Attilla then springs into the sky to execute a definitive blow. Otto evades, and the armament crashes forcefully against the earth. Noticing an opportunity, he proclaims that triumph belongs to him. Attilla brands him as gullible and twirls his physique, maintaining a strong hold on his armament. The impact collides with Otto's visage using the broadside of the weapon. The force propels him backward, causing him to comprehend that his adversary is not of this world. Attilla advances while Otto stays on the ground. Within the throng, several individuals call out for their leader. However, they are swiftly instructed to be quiet. Subsequently, sounds reverberate across the stadium, imploring for the battle to cease. Otto falters to his feet, stained with blood, and grasping his shattered blade. One of the individuals calls out for him to halt, asserting that this is sufficient. Another pleads, asserting he will do whatever it takes to preserve his existence, even enlist in the conflict. He asserts that Otto cannot perish in a location such as this. Shifting his gaze to his allies, Otto observes that even with their hands bound, they continue to converse excessively. Nevertheless, he acknowledges that he would articulate the same if he were in their position. The blade slips from his grasp and strikes the earth. Subsequently, the announcer of the tournament proclaims that Otto is unable to proceed any further. Accompanied by a pale banner hoisted, he proclaims Attilla the victor. Otto faints and pitches forward. Attilla intercepts him prior to his descent. He claims that Otto is no longer merely an unknown individual. He subsequently recognizes him as a combatant deserving of honor. The audience bursts into jubilation as Lord Bertrand observes closely alongside his sentinels. From a distance, Bathory observes all with a subtle grin. The tiny alabaster being scurries across the arena's surface. As the sun descends, the hired warriors hoist Attilla onto their shoulders in jubilation. That evening, it becomes apparent that, at his behest, the mercenaries have formally allied with Bertrand's forces. In an alehouse, all raise their glasses in celebration of the fresh commencement of the Kyrie Mercenary Brigade. Otto exclaims that this evening all expenses are covered by the proprietor, and everyone should indulge and express their gratitude. One of the patrons requests additional provisions, and the innkeeper readily complies. Attilla, cradling the tiny being, comments on the swift recovery of everyone. Otto, proclaims that a genuine warrior acknowledges loss and demonstrates fidelity. Yet he is prohibited from consuming alcohol. He laments that he hasn't had a solitary drop since he departed from his cell. His individuals restrain him as he attempts to grasp a cup. A fortnight later, Attilla is savoring a skewer and observes that Otto has made a solid recovery. The innkeeper advances to welcome him and notes that he learned of their involvement in the conflict, expressing confidence that they will achieve remarkable outcomes. Attilla inquires about the source of that information. The gentleman responds that one of the hired soldiers stated it and cautions that the beverages are dwindling. Subsequently, Attilla commands him to remain still. Perplexed, the innkeeper inquires what has affected him as Attilla rises from the table. He asserts that this individual is not the genuine proprietor of the establishment. The innkeeper inquires about his meaning. Attilla clarifies that he possesses no odor, akin to a puppet. He subsequently remarks that this is peculiar for an individual who is preparing and distributing food to everyone. Ultimately, Attilla inquires about his true nature or identity. The innkeeper's form starts to metamorphose in front of Attila's gaze. Otto promptly hurries over, and Attilla inquires about his true identity. Subsequently, the concealed individual remarks that he must possess considerable expertise to discern his ruse. He subsequently asserts that understanding his genuine identity holds no significance. The man wields his firearm and declares that regardless of the outcome, Attilla is destined for the afterlife. He lunges, but Attilla sidesteps the strike. The weapon strikes the chandelier, snuffing out the tavern's illumination. Attilla stays vigilant in the unexpected gloom. Otto shouts that it's utterly pitch black, but Attilla advises him to relax. He responds that it's impossible to remain tranquil in the shadows with a killer at large. At that moment, the adversary emerges from behind Otto and attempts to strike him. In the nick of time, Attilla yanks him out of the strike's range. He subsequently instructs his associate to remain silent and position themselves in the corner. He then faces the adversary and labels him a covert operative, renowned for his skill in deception. Attilla asserts he can recognize him by his build and power, disclosing him to be Rashid, a subpar killer. The hooded figure merely gazes at him, adopting a fighting posture. After a brief pause, Attilla inquires whether he isn't accurate. Rashid disappears from his view in a moment. Nevertheless, Attilla catches up to him from behind, placing a knife against his throat, and insists on discovering the source of that information. He assures that he will eliminate him without suffering if he responds truthfully. The other option, he states, is to experience his dermis removed gradually in torment. Rashid wonders whether he could truly accomplish that with merely the grip of his blade. The killer attempts to advance for an assault, yet he halts abruptly. An object is launched, and Attilla swiftly sidesteps. The sword slashes the adversary's visage, dividing the mask into two pieces. As the shattered facade descends to the ground, Rashid retreats. Now that his visage is revealed, he inquires how Attilla was able to discern his actions in the shadows. Attilla merely responds that it was due to the scent of hashish. Rashid echoes the words, astonished. Subsequently, Attilla discloses that the aroma is embedded, albeit subtly, in his concealed armaments. The killer inquires whether all his actions were discerned solely by the fragrance. He subsequently collapses to his knees and concedes failure. Rashid subsequently readies himself to end his existence with his dagger. Just before he can proceed, a hand extends and halts him. Attilla intervenes and inquires about Kassup. Taken aback, Rashid insists to understand the reason he is aware of his child's name. Attilla merely responds that he is unable to clarify. The account discloses that Kassup is Rashid's cherished offspring and that, in the times ahead, he will transform into a formidable supporter of Charles. In a state of desperation, Rashid implores them to refrain from harming the child, promising that he will do whatever it takes. Subsequently, Attilla declares that there exists a singular stipulation. The killer inquires what it entails. He commands Rashid to become his subordinate. Attilla assures him not to be concerned and to simply follow his instructions. Without delay, the assassin kneels, declaring that a warrior's pact is irrevocable. He mentions that he will reach out to him subsequently. Subsequently, Rashid begins to howl. Attilla urges him to cease, stating that he need not interpret it so precisely. Otto and his companions are taken aback by the unexpected sound. From afar, Botry Elizabeth observes the tableau and ponders their activities. She inquires whether this constitutes a form of ceremony devoted to an unidentified deity. Nevertheless, she puts the inquiry on hold, inquisitive and enthusiastic about the future with her newfound companions. Spring draws to a close. Each individual experiences rigorous preparation. During a warm day in the southern region of the continent, the mounted troops progress. A. The metropolis is engulfed in flames amidst a brutal assault. The conflict had commenced, and the appearance of warriors clad in complete armor was proclaimed. They are recognized as the Golden Lion Mercenary Company, commanded by Charles Einhard. A contingent of lancers advances in orderly alignment. Battle flags ascend across the combat zone. The horsemen surge ahead with great velocity. A leader vociferates directives, instructing his troops to eradicate all the Gasconian timorous. Subsequently, another warrior bellows for them to demonstrate the might of the Aquitanians. He commands them to eliminate everyone, but his head is severed entirely in that moment. His troops shout the name of their deceased leader. At that instant, they notice a hatchet hurtling in their direction. The instrument crashes into the earth as a solitary silhouette gallops ahead on a steed. The troops speculate whether the Gasconian forces are launching a complete assault. Nonetheless, one of them recognizes that it is merely an individual assaulting solo. Attilla fervently attempts to control his obstinate steed. Even. Therefore, the creature charges into the adversary lines, toppling numerous soldiers. In the midst of the turmoil, it whirls and delivers blows with its armament. Attilla observes that this wasn't precisely the strategy, but there are no alternatives at this point. He assaults an adversary knight, regretting that he wished to avoid attracting so much notice. One of the troops labels him a fiend, exclaiming that he lacks humanity. Observing this, the leader commands a complete withdrawal. The troops commence their retreat on horseback. Attilla, nonetheless, harbors no desire to permit their evasion. He seizes a collection of javelins from the earth. He then gets ready to launch them. The ability, Spear Hurl, is initiated. The projectiles soar towards the retreating adversaries. The steed of one of the soldiers is struck first. Shortly thereafter, the men are struck by the javelins. Equestrians and their steeds tumble to the earth simultaneously. Attilla gallops ahead on his steed, bellowing, "Assault!" His companions trail behind, imploring him not to proceed by himself. Otto then comprehends that the battle has already commenced. His adversaries identify him as Otto, the monstrous sword of the Kyrie mercenary faction. With that, they deduce that the executioner, Attilla, should also be in attendance. Beneath Attila's leadership, the Kyrie mercenary faction moves rapidly, with every individual fulfilling their role. They ready themselves for the impending confrontation with that individual. In a different location, a ceremonial induction is occurring at the cathedral. Count Aculé de Aculé is bestowed with his designation, Charles. Einhard is bestowed with knighthood. He is assigned the responsibility of safeguarding the populace and serving as their guardian. The women present remark on his looks. They express with admiration that he is merely 18 years of age. Two aristocrats, however, cannot fathom that a plebeian has attained knighthood and start to disparage his modest beginnings. One individual proposes that Charles is merely a human offering, intended to act as a barrier for the genuine rulers. At that moment, an individual lightly touches the aristocrat on the shoulder. A burly individual approaches and remarks that disparaging others is unwise. Ruach, leader of the elite strike team, asserts that disparaging Charles is even more reprehensible. Infuriated, the aristocrat insists on discovering his identity, declaring that he holds the title of Baron. A different individual swiftly intervenes and expresses remorse to Baron Ruach for his associate's impoliteness. He presents himself as Pippin, the second in command of the Golden Lion Mercenary Organization. The Baron disregards the introduction and inquires how Pippin is aware of his identity. Pippin serenely responds that all individuals present at the event have been recognized. Astonished, the aristocrat inquires whether they have truly committed to memory all 800 attendees. He subsequently infers that it must be a deception, characteristic of commoners. Pippin expresses regret for the interruption and prepares to depart. Nevertheless, the Baron halts him, inquiring whether plebeians are permitted to insult an aristocrat and merely depart. With the utmost respect, Pippin clarifies that Ruach merely cautioned him against disrespecting Charles. He asserts that offending a knight without justification is unlawful. He subsequently asserts that the Baron himself will not escape retribution. The aristocrat labels him a bother and instructs him to depart. Pippin apologizes and makes his exit. Subsequently that evening, he halts as he strolls through the forest. observing. A bug alighted on his arm. He remarks on the astonishing swiftness of the being. Charles inquires about his thoughts, and Pippin responds that the event has concluded, and they will be departing for combat the following day. Charles recommends that he simply allow the idle imbeciles to speak. He asserts that he will dominate the nation and will not tolerate any disrespect towards himself or his allies. Pippin concurred, stating that it is a guarantee. Charles validates the dedication with a fist bump. Subsequently, Pippin notes that he has acquired information regarding a notably powerful mercenary in Gasconu. He indicates that the individual appears to possess authority akin to that of Charles Einhard himself. Charles wonders whether the hired gun is truly that formidable. Wearing a self-assured grin, he expresses his eagerness to encounter him on the front lines. Otto inquires of Attilla whether he may observe the celestial prison. The youthful savage appears to be perplexed by the inquiry. Otto clarifies that it's due to Attila's impeccable understanding of the opposition's encampment and their military strength. Yet Attila refutes possessing any such skill. While his troops revel, Otto asserts that this signifies divine favor. Meanwhile, Attila quietly contemplates the belief of a past outlaw. When addressed as Sir Former Knight, he responds that he has never possessed any aristocratic designation. Attila subsequently asserts that it is evident the celestial forces are not in their favor. He effortlessly comprehends the dynamics of the combat zone, and he must proceed without deviating from the original path to ensure that Charles can discover the enchanted domain securely. Abruptly, the heavens become overcast, leaving Otto bewildered by the unexpected shift. Attila gazes upward and ponders whether it signifies a portent of some sort. An eclipse starts to take shape in the heavens. He observes the occurrence and notes that he did not compose a scene of this nature in the initial piece. Rashid kneels and informs that the Golden Lion mercenary faction intends to split its forces in half within 5 days. Attila perceives that Charles has at last begun to make progress. He claims to comprehend and encourages Rashid to persist with the excellent effort. The Gascon army ought to have participated in the conflict, yet Bledo was vanquished. As a result, Gasconu's military power became entirely inadequate. Should circumstances persist in this manner, the conflict will conclude prior to Charles uncovering the enchanted domain. Attila beckons to Otto, who inquires if he requires any assistance. Reluctant to permit the narrative he crafted to become further twisted, he declares that they will assault the Golden Lion mercenary faction. Otto requests a brief pause, doubting whether he understood the objective accurately, and Attila verifies. The hired soldier cautions that whispers suggest the faction comprises more than 100 individuals. But the youthful warrior retorts that he is already aware. Otto seizes him and cautions that their chief Charles is perilous and possesses strength comparable to his own. In reply, Attila merely inquires if he is not going to participate. Otto affirms that he will and is instructed to prepare. He contends that arrangements would require a minimum of 10 days to assemble armor, provisions, and arms. He additionally indicates that the mercenaries require further instruction. Nevertheless, Attila commands them to leave without delay. Perplexed, Otto inquires about the precise meaning of immediately. With a grin, Attila elucidates that the trio of former knights, accompanied by himself and Otto, will depart immediately. 5 days later, a conflict is erupting on the southern front. Pippin and his troops respond in astonishment to what they observe on the combat field. He asserts he was unaware of any information regarding this matter. A gentleman proclaims that the Black Wolf clan has come to bolster Gascogne as they progress over the defeated knights. Pippin readies his remaining troops to confront the encroaching fighters. One of the marauders launches an assault and takes down a knight. The same combatant then advances and overpowers yet another soldier. Upon the conclusion of the altercation, Pippin and his companions are sprawled on the earth. Subsequently, within the marquee of the Golden Lion Mercenary Battalion's encampment, Charles notifies his troops that the Black Wolf clan emerged on the southern front today. A knight inquires whether that warrior faction has indeed formed an alliance with Gascogne. He affirms, clarifying that they are swiftly broadening their reach with intense drive. Nonetheless, Charles perceives this as a chance to attain military recognition. He subsequently declares that the inaugural unit's objective has shifted and commands prompt deployment to the front line. His team, comprising Pippin and Ruach, reacts swiftly to the command. Pippin announces that the primary team is prepared to leave. Charles expresses his gratitude and departs, assigning the second unit to his authority. He subsequently faces his troops and commands the initial division to move forward. Prior to departing, he implores Pippin not to perish. He responds by avoiding discussion of events that are unlikely to occur. Ruach arrives and expresses that fretting over Pippin is unwarranted. Charles subsequently instructs Ruach to ensure his own safety as well, to which he responds that he relies on his commander. With resolve, Charles proclaims they will attain prominence and ascend in this nation. His. Individuals, including Pippin and Ruach, demonstrate prompt backing. 4 silhouettes depart into the shadows. Pippin addresses his troops and commands them to embark on a quest for the enemy leaders' heads. As they get ready to depart, he observes a swift motion. Attilla springs from the woodland towards a pair of knights. Wielding his firearm, he proclaims that he has at last located them. Pippin swiftly maneuvers to thwart Attila's strike. The moment shifts back to 5 days prior amidst the eclipse. Otto wonders if it's truly feasible to assault the Golden Lion in merely 5 nights. Attilla, however, merely urges him to expedite his preparations. As he hones his weapon, he clarifies that the sole method to alter the trajectory of the conflict is to diminish the Golden Lion's military power. He states that this is their sole opportunity, exploiting Charles's lack of presence. In the present moment, Attila's unexpected assault strikes Pippin. The deputy captain is propelled backward by the strength of the collision. Attilla subsequently advises him to simply conduct himself appropriately. The warriors of the second unit promptly encircle him. Concealed within the foliage, Otto and his companions become anxious and propose taking action. He halts them, asserting that the strategy would be compromised if they vacated their posts, leaving the others bewildered. Otto subsequently elucidates that the approach is to observe Attilla conquer the adversary troops single-handedly. Attilla remarks that the initial strategy was merely to assault Pippin and then withdraw. Nevertheless, he understands that the circumstances will not be quite that straightforward. Warriors progress towards him, and he readies himself for battle. Attilla vaults and twirls his armament through the atmosphere. In one fluid gesture, he assails multiple knights simultaneously. 3 of them assault the location where he had been only moments earlier. Pippin observes the motion and alerts about the impending strike from above. Attilla steadies himself and presents a forceful impact with the earth. The collision triggers a colossal eruption of soil. The shockwave radiates across the whole vicinity. From his concealed location, Otto remarks that everything unfolded precisely as intended. As the debris starts to calm, the silhouettes of warriors are unveiled, soaring through the atmosphere. Pippin lies on the ground, his blade adjacent to him. Ruach positions himself at the forefront to safeguard him, and the deputy captain comprehends the seriousness of the circumstances. The captain of the assault unit proclaims his intention to safeguard him, as he vowed to Charles. Pippin vocalizes Ruach's name. He pivots and vows to safeguard him, just as he would shield the family he has come to cherish. Joyful recollections with his companions, and Charles raced through his thoughts. He asserts that family is something valuable to protect as he elevates his shield. Spirit readies for battle. He concentrates wholly on the impending conflict. Subsequently, he proclaims himself as the protector and confronts Attilla. Attilla commends him, stating he is remarkable. Ruach inquires if he is the individual referred to as the figure of the slaughter. The youthful savage responds that it appears he is beginning to merit that designation. He presents himself as Ruach, leader of the strike team. With determination, he proclaims that he will conquer him. Attilla merely grins in reply. Ruach lunges ahead with a battle shout. He springs into the sky and readies his assault. Nonetheless, Attilla responds, initially leaping in for a crippling strike. He descends, with his armament poised, confronting Ruach directly. The leader of the attack squad endeavors to respond to the collision. Pippin shouts his fellow's name. Ruach is cast aside, vanquished. Attilla pivots and declares that this should suffice. Pippin identifies him as the perpetrator of the slaughter. He likens him to Charles in terms of strength. Nevertheless, he quickly comes to the realization that he possesses even greater power. Pippin realizes that Attilla will pose a significant challenge for the Golden Lion. With that, he instructs his troops to create a protective barrier formation. The troops swiftly arrange themselves into formation around him. Attilla observes that, as anticipated of Pippin, he possesses the ability to direct 100 warriors with a solitary command. The soldier spirit, which had been declining abruptly increases. The marksmen assume their stances and get ready to launch their assault. Subsequently, Pippin commands them to unleash their arrows. Pippin commands the troops to establish a barrier of shields. The troops consolidate in a protective arrangement, merging lances and barricades. From afar, Otto and his crew observe, contemplating the potential risks of that strategy. Attilla swiftly identifies the arrangement as a phalanx. It's a tactic in which warriors interlace their shields and progress as a unified entity. However, straightforward, it enables all individuals to protect themselves simultaneously. It also facilitates synchronized assaults. This is the most efficient strategy against disorganized adversaries. Otto becomes alarmed, alerting that they are moving closer to them. Upon hearing this, the youthful warrior shouts for his comrades to elevate their shields as well. A display interface initiates the assistance ability, Tactical Awareness. Attilla cautions that a deluge of projectiles is imminent. The phalanx warriors elevate their shields over their heads. The projectiles cascade upon the arrangement, impeded by the solid fortification. Attilla gazes at the barrier of shields that entirely thwarted the assault. Otto is astonished to observe that, as anticipated, the missiles have indeed arrived. He then inquires about the nature of the bulkier, advancing projectiles. One of them strikes the surface and detonates with intensity. Bearing his troops on his shoulders, Attilla dashes through the woodland, instructing them to hang on tight. He indicates that he has already diminished the Golden Lion's troops and wishes to withdraw. Nevertheless, with those archers present, there is no opportunity for an exit. He subsequently instructs his troops to dismount. They inquire, believing they are being forsaken. Attilla refutes it, and merely throws them gently onto the floor. Subsequently, he pivots and declares that he will thwart them. Pippin commands his troops to prevent his escape and to fire in order to subdue him. A fresh barrage of arrows is launched towards him. Attilla sprints straight towards the missiles. His soldiers observe the spectacle and exclaim in distress regarding the projectiles. He twirls his armament through the atmosphere, redirecting every projectile. The projectiles are swatted aside and propelled into the air. He subsequently proceeds to move forward, evading every strike while airborne. Pippin and the troops observe his progression in astonishment. The deputy captain ponders how an individual can evade 100 projectiles and persist onward. He ponders what type of being he is encountering. Attilla merely grins as he prepares his armament. With a cry, he hurls the whirling axe. The missile soars rapidly towards the formation. The armament strikes the initial line of defenses. It cuts through troops and fortifications as though there were no opposition. Subsequently, the hatchet reappears, rotating back towards Attilla. Injured, Pippin withdraws, grasping his limb. He comprehends that the structure, refined over countless years, was obliterated by one solitary toss. The remaining warriors gaze at Attilla, now positioned in the far-off distance. The assistant captain quietly expresses remorse to Charles. Subsequently, he collapses to his knees, declaring that his expedition concludes at this point. Pippin lowers his gaze, bracing for the ultimate strike. Nevertheless, Attilla merely remarks that it was an enjoyable battle. He subsequently pivots and begins to stride away. Pippin observes him depart and exclaims in exasperation. Otto remarks that, earnestly, he genuinely believed he was about to perish. Immediately afterward, he shouts that the leader will need to bear the burden from this point forward. Attilla inquires about the subject of discussion. He subsequently declares his intention to commence everyone's training from the very beginning. Astonishing the hired soldier, a bird soars in his direction and alights on his limb. With a bird perched on his shoulder, he receives a message and discovers it's from Rashid. Attilla swiftly pivots his horse, abandoning his companions. Otto inquires about his destination. Without responding, he gallops at rapid pace through the woods. In other locations on the combat zone, Charles confronts Munzuk, who is on the verge of initiating a monumental conflict. The communication instructed to proceed without delay to the Guyenne area, as Charles was en route to Chief Munzuk's position. Attilla ponders the reason for the Black Wolf clan's presence on the combat zone. He does not recall composing a passage akin to that in the initial narrative. A recollection emerges, depicting Munzuk lauding him as a son. Shortly thereafter, he remembers the tribal leader urging him to find more joy. Attilla shouts as he persists in his gallop. He vows to rescue him regardless of the consequences and requests him to simply wait. The setting subsequently transitions to the encampment of the Black Wolf tribe. A brutal assault is in progress. splashing crimson on the earth. Charles Einhard strides toward a defeated combatant and insists that he respond. He subsequently inquires whether he is acquainted with a savage fighter brandishing a hefty axe. The individual asserts that he is unfamiliar with anyone matching that description. Charles pivots and remarks that it's unfortunate. Clutching his blade, the injured fighter urges him to pause. Then Charles inquires whether he truly just instructed him to wait. He proclaims that savages are adversaries of Aquitaine. His troops willingly concur. Charles goes on to mention that they executed an unexpected assault and eliminated numerous members of his unit. The men rally behind him once more with cheers. With his blade elevated, he asserts that he will spare not a solitary savage. A voice disrupts him, commanding him to pause. Charles pivots and remarks that he did not anticipate his arrival in this place. Subsequently, Chief Munzuk discloses himself in front of him. The mythical champion, referred to as the divine combatant, establishes himself for battle. Charles examines that an assault founded exclusively on power invariably necessitates planning. He thinks he has a favorable opportunity if he seizes the instant Munzuk elevates his axe. Nonetheless, the clan leader strikes him initially, propelling him through the air. Munzuk presses the assault with a formidable strike. Charles defends with his blade, observing the adversary's incredible swiftness. Munzuk labels him a novice for absorbing the impact from the flank. He subsequently lunges ahead with a fist. The force strikes the side of Charles's physique. He is pushed back by the intensity of the strike. Munzuk presses forward once more with the hatchet. The tribal leader is astonished to witness Charles thwart his strikes on 2 occasions. Upon touchdown, Charles accumulates vitality in his palms. Munzuk, nonetheless, observes that his adversary's limb is unsteady. Thus he springs towards him. The knight gazes upward, confronting the impending assault. Munzuk labels him as unseasoned and brandishes his axe for the decisive strike. The sword plunges down towards him. At that instant, numerous missiles are launched at rapid velocity. Charles strikes Munzuk with the assault. The tribal leader is punctured in multiple areas of his physique. Nevertheless, he continues to stand, responding with astonishment. Munzuk gazes at the injuries on his torso and shoulder. Charles subsequently elevates his blade, organizing a fresh offensive. A series of advancement alerts emerges consecutively. Ultimately, Charles proclaims that the more he engages in battle, the mightier he grows. Charles Einhard gets ready to confront Munzuk. The leader of the Black Wolf clan remarks that the tension from the blade has heightened, deeming the circumstances intriguing. He subsequently lifts his axe and remarks that at the very least, he won't be dull. Charles meticulously observes his adversary's every action. Munzuk pounds the earth with tremendous intensity. The ensuing shockwave propels Charles backwards. He identifies the method as a suction blade. Munzuk propels forward with a crushing lateral strike. Charles leaps over the assault, barely avoiding its reach. Munzuk lauds his cane upon the breath, but compels him with a fresh assault. Charles encounters a 3-pronged assault approaching him. The strikes impacted the earth, obliterating all in the vicinity. Munzuk is astonished to discover that another individual than Awashida endured that assault. Amidst the debris, a formidable blade is uncovered. Charles Einhard appears unharmed, grasping his sword resolutely. The clan leader is astonished that every strike was prevented. With an assured grin, Charles proclaims that it is now his moment. He subsequently readies himself for the counteroffensive. Charles elevates his blade high above his head and executes a forceful downward blow. The assault strikes Munzuk directly. Charles Einhard continues to be recognized as. His adversary collapses onto the floor. He proclaims Munzuk's downfall and insists on discovering the whereabouts of the butcher. The leader of the tribe replies merely with a chuckle. Charles inquires about the rationale behind that response. Fallen, Munzuk gestures and instructs him to glance over his shoulder. Charles pivots to observe what is coming near. Attilla then descends onto the battlefield and declares that he has arrived precisely at the right moment. He insists that Charles distance himself from his father. Charles instantly identifies him as the meat vendor. Attilla moves forward and instructs him to step aside or he will be pushed aside. Charles, nevertheless, simply invites him to attempt. The 2 armaments collide in a fleeting moment. The 2 combatants assess their might in an outright clash. The effect of the crash produces an enormous shockwave. Charles's sword repels Attila's hatchet. Abruptly, Attilla experiences a sharp ache in his skull. A cautionary dialogue pops up, notifying him that he has come across the tale's main character, Charles Einhard. Shortly thereafter, the alert reveals the initiation of the Creator Safeguard Initiative. Attilla is immobilized as the mechanism engages. Subsequently, an additional authority, referred to as the Mind's Eye, is granted to him. A notification window indicates that the author's safeguarding software is being initiated. Concurrently, an additional entity, referred to as the Mind's Eye, is revealed. Attilla ponders what precisely the Mind's Eye represents. Devoid. Allowing him a moment to reflect, Charles advances to persist in the assault. He understands that this is not the moment to become sidetracked. He subsequently targets his adversary's shoulder precisely. Attilla is astonished by the abrupt shift. Nevertheless, he succeeds in evading the strike at the final moment. The evening is astonished by the unforeseen evasion. With a subtle grin, Attilla demonstrates his admiration. He recognizes that this intensified awareness is the result of the Mind's Eye. A fresh pain emerges, showcasing Charles's battle strength as 500. Attilla observes that this figure is 100 points greater than in the initial narrative. Shortly thereafter, the number rises to 503. He observes his opponent's strength rise once more. Confronted with this, he starts to organize himself according to the updated insights. The system interface discloses that Attila's battle prowess stands at 800. Consequently, he determines that extending the conflict might pose an issue. Charles Einhard swiftly charges ahead to strike. He subsequently opts to capitalize on a vulnerability in his adversary. Attilla is astonished by the rapidity of the charge. He deflects the strike and acknowledges that the blade's velocity is also escalated. Charles determines to seize the weapon from his grasp. Consequently, he assaults Attila's axe head-on. Attilla perceives that the assault occurs precisely as he devises his strategies. The knight sustains the assault with an exceptionally accurate blow. The edge brushes against Attila's figure. He swiftly recuperates and asserts that the battle is not concluded just yet. His gaze concentrates on locating an opening. Capitalizing on the slightest opportunity, Attilla launches a counteroffensive. Charles is taken aback by the unforeseen response. Attilla seizes the weapon and clutches his opponent's wrist. He subsequently contorts his arm with great intensity. In a rapid motion, he hoists Charles onto his shoulder. Attilla readies himself for the decisive strike. Subsequently, he delivers a forceful strike directly to the knight's torso. Strike hits directly. Upon his arrival, he proclaims that the battle has concluded. Charles's Xie Di Luoza Di Miansha. Nevertheless, the knight rises, injured, yet still eager to battle. Attilla responds, recognizing that his adversary remains upright. A system interface indicates that Charles's fighting strength has attained 800. The figure quickly escalates to 810. He recognizes that the number continues to increase incessantly. The power enhancement intensifies. Attilla grins, recognizing the power of the hero he himself brought into existence. Charles's. The iron heart presses forward once more, armament in grasp. His existence is now all-consuming. Attilla observes him closely, recognizing that this individual is extraordinary. The more they trade strikes, and the more Attilla eludes the assaults, the greater Charles's influence expands. With a resolute grin, he resolves to give it his all. He subsequently springs into the air for a pivotal strike. Nonetheless, a cut strikes him squarely in the chest. Equally injured, he pledges to conquer Charles. Charles subsequently proclaims his intention to pursue the route of the sovereign monarch. He charges ahead with his most formidable strike. The knife penetrates profoundly into Attila's torso and visage. The effect of the ultimate strike ravages the adjacent terrain. Charles's steely heart observes as the smoke gradually fades away. Reclining on the earth, Munzuk observes the spectacle quietly. Charles pivots as he senses an unfamiliar presence. A surge of force abruptly propels him backward. He is unable to fathom that his adversary endured. Nevertheless, Attilla emerges from the debris. With a resolute grin, he confronts Charles once again. As soon as their gazes intersect, Attilla cautions him that he is approaching. Charles's intuition shouts peril. Attilla subsequently pounds his fist into the earth, elevating a cloud of dust and rubble. Taken aback by the movement, Charles gazes upward. Subsequently, Attilla propels the knight's discarded sword in his direction. The armament strikes the terrain, resulting in a tremendous detonation. In the haze, Charles expresses his frustration that he is unable to perceive anything. Attilla materializes behind him, poised to attack. The warrior whirls swiftly to protect himself. Attilla strikes with a double-fisted sledgehammer impact. The force strikes directly against Charles's torso. Moving forward with another strike, Attilla instructs him to consume this and rest. Charles contorts his physique to thwart the imminent assault. In one fluid movement, he seizes the hilt of the sword lying on the ground. He promptly deflects Attila's punch. Attilla responds, astonished by the unforeseen resistance. Grinning, Charles inquires if he has only just realized. A system interface displays that his offensive strength has ascended to 900, and Attilla observes that it continues to ascend. Charles thrusts with his blade. However, Attilla deflects the strike with his limbs. The offensive strength escalates to 901. Attilla is repelled by the strength of the collision. The gauge persists in ascending, attaining 902. The two engage in a swift and vigorous series of strikes. Charles's influence expands relentlessly without any indication of halting. The warrior gallops forward, shouting for his adversary to perish. Attilla is taken aback by the aggressive assault. Nonetheless, he tightens his hand into a fist, prepared to retaliate. Attilla progresses with a strike, resolute to conclude the battle. The fist strikes squarely against the edge of Charles's blade. The force shatters the armament. With a yell, Attilla harnesses his complete strength. The strike splinters the sword and propels Charles into the air. The blast from the assault immobilizes the combat zone. Charles Einhard collapses to the ground, unable to persist in the battle. Attilla stands upright, breathing heavily following his triumph. The war zone grows quiet following the clash. He advances towards Munzuk and inquires whether his father is well. Munzuk assures him not to be concerned. Attilla lifts him up and is met with a word of gratitude. The leader of the tribe remarks on how significantly he has developed during their brief separation. Perplexed by the comment, Attilla pivots to confront him. Munzuk describes that his gaze exhibited a frenzy throughout the battle. He asserts that it reflected the expression of a fighter who masters warfare. Ultimately, he determines that his offspring has not faltered in his demanding regimen. Attilla inquires about the strictness he refers to. He then recalls something, prompting Munzuk to inquire about the abrupt interruption. As they stroll away, Charles addresses him as Butcher and urges him to pause. Attilla pivots to confront the vanquished knight. Charles requests to be put to an end, stating that compassion at this juncture would be futile. He inquires whether his rival will persist in becoming increasingly powerful. He subsequently urges him to elevate his strength further so they can engage in combat once more. Bathory observes the display and contemplates why Attilla possesses such strength. She conjectures whether he could be a follower of a martial deity, such as Ares or Tyr. A gentleman emerges, remarking on her evident curiosity. The sorceress addresses him as Reberu. The sorcerer lifts his goblet and proclaims that Attilla is an exceptionally intriguing fighter. Reberu presents her with a smobachi concoction, characterizing its aromatic and subtly briny taste. He remarks that the venom coursing through his mouth is unexpectedly invigorating. Bathory. Elizabeth refers to him as Lieber and remarks that he is genuinely quite intriguing. She then inquires whether he is not meddling a tad excessively. Reberu responds that merely observing from the periphery is tedious. He admits his yearning to fully inhabit the existence of a bird, and furthermore the presence of a redundant individual. Shortly thereafter, he expresses his desire to experience life as an arthropod. Bathory. Observations that his inquisitive nature is remarkably robust. However, she counsels him not to become overly immersed in pursuing insects like a youngster, and inadvertently cause their demise, squashing the being in his own grasp. Ribera simply responds that he is aware, shifting his gaze towards her. Subsequently, he discloses that it was merely a prank. Outdoors, the troops rejoice at the triumph of the Butcher over the Lion King, and that the Kiri mercenary group has vanquished the Golden Lion. The gossip that the Lion King was vanquished by the meat vendor circulates rapidly. Subsequently, the Kiri mercenary battalion persists in its progression, and the momentum of the conflict shifts in Gascony's advantage. Nevertheless, referencing the fatigue of both forces, a ceasefire is unexpectedly enacted. One of the hired guns can scarcely fathom that the faction was welcomed to the Duke's abode, deeming it all a fantasy. He rejoices, asserting that they will be commended for their martial triumphs, and that they are ascending rapidly in society. Attilla remarks that this is undoubtedly an improvement compared to when they were pursued like criminals. The individual justifies his actions, claiming it was solely for the sake of survival, asserting that they had no alternatives. Nevertheless, Attilla merely inquires whether that is truly the case. Following this, he expresses that, truthfully, the supervisor lacks any empathy whatsoever. He then shifts his attention to the tiny being and inquires whether the bear fellow believes the same. Attilla sets him straight, stating that he isn't fond of bears. The hired soldier becomes frantic and pleads with them to at least assign a name to the tiny bear. Attilla gazes at the being perched on his shoulder and contemplates it. Subsequently, he gazes at it and inquires whether it desires a designation. The tiny alabaster being energetically nods its head, indicating a negative response. Even. Thus, Attilla recommends selecting something that resonates with power. With a grin, he inquires about their opinions on the beverage. The being becomes thrilled by the mention and embraces him. Attilla inquires, astonished if it enjoyed it. A dialogue box emerges, verifying that Punch has been designated, which leaves him bewildered. The system subsequently categorizes Punch as a phantom creature. All accrued experience is promptly calculated. Unexpectedly, Punch begins advancing multiple times consecutively. Attilla gazes at the window and remarks that a battle strength of 50 is quite substantial. Shortly thereafter, the system presents the monster inventory feature. He contemplates what precisely a creature catalog might entail. At that instant, a blade zips by him, notifying him. One of his associates exclaims, taken aback by the unexpected assault. The remaining mercenaries begin to inquire about the unfolding situation. Attilla tugs on his steed's reins and shouts for everyone to proceed with caution. He subsequently unsheathes his armament, observing something peculiar about the hurled blade. It is a covert dagger, a distinctive concealed armament employed by assassins. Attilla is astonished to discover the identity of the perpetrator behind the assault. A lady clad in combat gear materializes in front of him. Subsequently, she presents herself as Caspi Aiden. Otto is ensnared by Caspi's visage. Nevertheless, Attilla strikes him forcefully and cautions him against being reckless. The strike dislodges him from his steed and propels him to the earth. He rises shortly thereafter and requests to be handled with care, confessing that he's a fool. Caspi Aiden inquires whether they truly constitute a mercenary group. She subsequently remarks that they appear quite feeble. Following that, she dares them to test their capabilities. She activates a mechanism that deploys numerous crimson items. The objects tumble around Attilla and his associates. Abruptly, they detonate upon the earth, startling the equines. The creatures become frantic and start to flail uncontrollably. The remaining hired soldiers are cast from their steeds. One of them becomes alarmed and inquires about what that is. Attilla shouts for them not to be frightened, clarifying that they are merely pyrotechnics the defeated individuals gaze at him during. He views them as a bother. With a mocking grin, Caspi cautions that this is merely the outset. The elite class assassin advances and vanishes in the blink of an eye. Attilla is astonished to discover that she has entirely disappeared shortly thereafter. Subsequently, he comes to the grim realization that he is encircled by adversaries in the woods and bemoans the necessity of confronting this predicament. One of his associates is ensnared in a cord snare on the terrain. Attilla spins around instantaneously, aware that the wagers have been initiated just above. The hired gun shouts, coming to the realization that Caspi is a genuine mastermind with snares. Attilla charges ahead and pushes him aside. He cautions him that he will be overwhelmed if he doesn't take action. At that instant, Attila's foot becomes ensnared in a viscous material on the earth. The sticky snare immobilizes him entirely. Pickets descend with great intensity, striking the earth and the other hired soldiers. Attilla shouts, labeling her a sorceress. He subsequently engages tactical surveillance, uncovering numerous hazards dispersed throughout the area. He perceives an astonishing multitude of them, as if they had chanced upon a serendipitous convergence of destiny. A silhouette swiftly glides among the foliage. The killer grins, pleased with the effectiveness of the ambush. Attilla rises and proclaims that his feet will not become ensnared like that once more. Subsequently, he vaults effortlessly into the sky, resolved to penetrate all barriers, even those that lie above. Caspi, observing, monitors the activity, astonished by the abrupt response. She is amazed to witness him ascend the tree and contemplates what might be amiss with that individual. Attilla dashes through the limbs with great velocity. He notices her during his final maneuver and verifies that there are no additional hazards in the vicinity. Shortly thereafter, he spots her on an elevated limb. Attilla lunges ahead, resolute to conclude this once and for all. Caspi flings chains in his direction and shouts for him not to approach any nearer. Attilla evades them with a casual, "Hey, Nevertheless, Caspi grins and discloses that it was merely a jest. Subsequently, Attilla springs back to evade the shackles that rise from beneath. He subsequently comprehends that her armament is a blade affixed to a tether. Attilla concentrates on the imminent assault. Surely, subsequently, he becomes entirely constrained by the shackles. Caspi cautions him that striving is futile, clarifying that the shackles are constructed from dwarven metal and possess the strength to sever his arm. With a self-assured grin, Attilla responds that this is precisely the reason he is cautioning her. Subsequently, he starts to break the bonds, shouting that this is insufficient. Caspi yells in astonishment as she is seized. She dangles from a tree, insisting on being freed immediately. Attilla interrogates her regarding the individual who employed her services. She declines to respond, asserting that a hired killer would never disclose the identity of a patron. With no alternative available, he engages the third eye. The killer curses that scoundrel Roland for failing to inform her about such a formidable individual. From this, Attilla infers that Roland is the one who contracted her services. The purported ceasefire between Aquitaine and Gascony is subsequently unveiled. Superficially, the stated rationale was the fatigue of both military forces. Nevertheless, the genuine cause is the intensifying succession conflict within Gascony. He considers it abhorrent that they continue to eliminate mercenaries on their own faction, reminiscent of the initial narrative. With a faint grin, he resolves to guarantee that Saxon ascends to the role of successor. Attilla summons his troops to depart, and Caspi inquires about their destination. One of the hired guns bids farewell, referring to her as Kitty, as a raven observes from a neighboring limb. Attilla and his warriors reach Duke Gascony's estate. One of the hired soldiers becomes exhilarated by the vastness of the location, proclaiming that Gascony is extraordinarily affluent. Attilla straightforwardly instructs them to continue onward. They step into the opulent foyer of the estate. The party is awestruck by their surroundings. All are in awe of the exquisite furnishings and the plentiful cuisine. Otto, the fiend's blade, inquires if he may sample it, yet Attilla advises him to behave himself. A gentleman strides over, greets them warmly, and expresses his gratitude for their presence. Attilla and Otto pivot in astonishment to confront their host. He presents himself as Saxon Gascony, the younger son of the Gascony lineage. Otto identifies him as the patron who engaged their services, and expresses gratitude for all he has done. Saxon expresses gratitude towards the Curie mercenary group, highlighting that, due to their efforts, numerous warriors return safely. Males respond humbly, whereas Otto proposes to elaborate on their actions thoroughly. An additional individual arrives and recognizes them as the Curie Mercenary Battalion. It is Roland Gascany, the eldest offspring of the Gascony lineage. Saxon shouts to his sibling, Roland. He pivots and declares that he is astonished that such low-life scum as them would have the audacity to appear here. He subsequently intimidates them, declaring he will exhibit no compassion if they overstep boundaries. The sentinels swiftly assume a combat stance. Otto, perplexed, inquires whether they have made an error. He contemplates whether it was due to his earlier meal. Attilla responds, perhaps. Attilla recognizes Roland as the individual accountable for the assassination attempt. He observes that, akin to the initial narrative, Roland remains conceited and brimming with hubris. Saxon interjects, inquiring whether such a demeanor isn't disrespectful to the veterans of the conflict. Roland instructs his sibling to be silent, and questions whether that is an appropriate manner to address his senior, alleging that he is already behaving like the heir apparent. Saxon responds that Roland is the individual acting unacceptably. The older sibling merely mutters in discontent and strolls off. Saxon faces the mercenaries again and expresses regret for the humiliating spectacle. He bids farewell and advises them to relish the reception without any concerns. Otto remarks on the competition between siblings, yet Attilla inquires whether he can genuinely consume food in a scenario like this. Duke Gascany requests that all present elevate their goblets. The patriarch of the Gascony clan raises a glass to the magnificent future that lies ahead for them. The hired soldiers raise their glasses in unison, and Otto praises the excellence of the vintage. Attilla takes a gulp and observes something peculiar. Abruptly, Duke Gascony begins to expel blood from his mouth. He crumples to the ground as the attendees cry out for his favor. Suddenly, the Duke begins to expel a significant amount of blood, grasping at his throat. He subsequently falls entirely onto the ground as everyone exclaims his designation. Frantic, his son dashes ahead and shouts, beckoning for his father. Hastening to assist, an individual crouches and assesses the Duke's state. With a startled visage, he exclaims to all that the Duke has perished. Upon receiving the announcement, every attendee in the venue is utterly astonished. A brief distance away, a youthful individual observes the whole ruckus with a grave expression. Shifting. Roland indicates the young man as the culprit responsible for it all. With great volume, he exclaims, alleging that Zaxxon has killed his father. Utterly astonished, Zaxxon refutes the allegation, asserting that he did not commit the act. Upon this, the estate sentinels advance and swiftly encircle the youth. Furious, Zaxxon shouts, inquiring of Roland the significance of all this. Pointing towards his troops, Roland charges him with introducing marauders into the estate. Denying the allegation, he asserts that he perceives the plan and that this is not the moment for dispute. Roland asserts, vociferating that he is untruthful and assaulted his progenitor to claim the title of successor. Indicating his associates, Roland exclaims that Zaxxon exploited them in his scheme. In the midst of the chaos, the other aristocrats observe the scene with fearful countenances. Remaining composed, Zaxxon confronts his accuser, acknowledging that he possesses the sole authority. Roland subsequently proclaims that should the assassination prove unsuccessful, the subsequent course of action will be execution. Evaluating the sentinels, Zaxxon realizes that he possesses greater strength than depicted in the narrative. Entirely. Encircled, he and his team observe the javelins aimed towards them. His troops subsequently get ready to retaliate, poised for battle. However, Zaxxon promptly exclaims, instructing them to refrain from intervening entirely. He cautions that should they launch an assault, there will be no opportunity for any clarification. Seeking an escape, he employs his extraordinary power, known as Mind's Eye. At that moment, an unforeseen system window materializes in front of him, displaying an error notification. The notification indicates that the capability is ineffective on a subject of indeterminate identity. He's perplexed, pondering what this unfamiliar persona might signify. Gazing at his adversary, he contemplates whether that could be Roland. He clenches his jaw, pondering the possibility that it could be a doppelganger masquerading as a killer. Rejecting the notion of a disguise, he is aware that the fragrance would reveal his presence. Indicating the assembly, Roland commands the sentinels to eliminate them entirely. The troops subsequently progress with their lances, gearing up to assault the assembly. Yelling in anguish, one of his comrades inquires about their next course of action. Without a moment's pause, he seizes a gilded item that rested on the table. Witnessing the unforeseen event, Roland merely observes with a look of astonishment. With a swift, forceful motion, he flings the item toward him. Taken aback, the sentinels crouch as the projectile whizzes by them. The missile subsequently strikes Roland directly, forcefully penetrating his torso. Forming a substantial cavity, the assault passes completely through the center of his chest. Utterly astonished, his associates cry out in incredulity at the events that just transpired. All individuals in the auditorium become alarmed, and a guard commands his swift apprehension. Concerned about the circumstances, his associate addresses him by his designation, leader. He then perceives an unseen force in the atmosphere, a potency that eludes his awareness. Despite being injured, Roland grins and remarks that this is unjust for a human. As his thoracic injury heals, shackles start to manifest around him. Flabbergasted, his troops exclaim, bewildered by what on earth that could possibly be. Comprehending the circumstances, he acknowledges it must merely be a form of sorcery. Abruptly, numerous items in the corridor start to hover and soar through the atmosphere. As he is shoved aside, he notices an unusual plume drifting amid the turmoil. A plume remains suspended in the midst of the chamber, entirely unscathed following the detonation. Transitioning to another setting, an enigmatic hand gently clasps a goblet of wine. He is disclosed as the sovereign of Delbel's Terrace, witnessing the strife. With a grin, he observes that the circumstance is becoming increasingly intriguing. Upon returning to the estate, an urgent task display manifests for the main character. He subsequently gazes at the alert, astonished by the sight unfolding before him. His objective necessitates vanquishing the Crow Sovereign for a prize. Approaching. From above, a colossal assault impacts the edifice's framework with tremendous intensity. Attempting to protect themselves from the blast wave, the ensemble withstands the effect. Before the assembly, a magician emerges, showcasing the entirety of his formidable might. The account elucidates that magicians are entities possessing abilities beyond human comprehension. It proceeds to state that they exist in a realm vastly elevated above humanity. Harnessing his strength, he assaults the assembly of individuals simultaneously. Dashing through the vicinity, one of the youths exclaims in astonishment at what he observes. Subsequently, the account likens the circumstance to a bird pursuing a bug. The wizard's assault persists, striking numerous individuals who cry out from the ground. The account subsequently determines that it is unfeasible for a person to overcome a wizard. From afar, the team witnesses the numerous lifeless forms following the catastrophic assault. Amidst the defeated, a hand ascends as the individual emits a noise. Instantly afterward, the individual pivots towards the assembly and snarls. Indicating forward, one of the associates exclaims about that entity that emerged. At this, numerous other individuals rise and gradually approach them. Noticing the advancing multitude, he exclaims that the predicament is dire. At that moment, the youth in the crimson scarf cautions that they are approaching with all their might. Guided by the wizard, the manipulated individuals sprint towards the assembly. As he is besieged by the multitude, the man cries out, requesting a barrier for defense. In an effort to halt the progress, the mercenaries create a barricade with their shield. Seizing the opportunity presented by the diversion, he swiftly strikes one of the subdued individuals. Immediately following the impact, he anchors his feet firmly to the earth, prepared for combat. As the battle intensifies, the whole team confronts the multitude directly. Observing the throng, he readies a formidable dual-handed assault. He questions whether it's unattainable, since he is unable to eliminate the troops. Struggling, the hired soldier informs his commander that there are far too many to restrain. He determines that there is no time to waste, and he must conquer Liebel by himself immediately. Observing it all, the mage grins and waves his hand. In an instant, he observes a phenomenon emerging on the surface beneath him. At that moment, enchanting circles materialize on the ground, encircling the whole assembly of mercenaries. Unexpectedly, the rings on the surface detonate with immense power. Taken aback, he cries out as he attempts to protect himself from the eruption. He comprehends that it is a blend of the troops' assaults and distant sorcery. Relentlessly, the wizard unleashes another spellbound assault toward them. Struck directly, he is pushed back without an opportunity to retaliate. Adjacent to him, a warrior is vanquished and calls out for assistance. Observing. As his soldiers fall, he contemplates his next course of action. Watching it all, the wizard merely mutters with a sense of arrogance. He then expresses that he is beginning to feel uninterested in the circumstances. As he readies a fresh assault, he inquires if it isn't the moment to conclude this. Witnessing the energy coalescing, one of the hired guns yells in utter fright. A colossal incantation materializes in the heavens, and he inquires about its nature. He merely gazes at the energy coalescing overhead, rendered motionless. The narration elucidates that this is the might of a mage. Subsequently, the account indicates he requires the Muhul blade for his protection. Anxious, he perceives the tiny being on his shoulder utter a noise. He subsequently shouts for his ally Punch to come indoors for his own safety. Immediately afterward, a system alert appears directly in front of him. Affirming the directive, the being replies and initiates the creature's inventory. He subsequently summons his associate Punch, readying himself for the confrontation. It is clarified that Punch is a protective creature capable of holding objects. Engaging. The arsenal. He calls out for his blade, the formidable Muhul. The tiny being gapes its mouth, poised to unleash the blade. Abruptly, the entity begins to gag, and he inquires about the issue. Suddenly, the beast expels the blade from its jaws. In a rapid motion, he ultimately brandishes his famed blade, Muhul. Witnessing the peculiar spectacle, the mercenaries are utterly immobilized by bewilderment. The wizard merely grins and inquires what that was intended to signify. At this moment, armed, he shouts at the wizard to cease his chatter. He cautions his adversary that his mirth will not endure for much longer. Upon concluding his remarks, he sprints at full velocity toward his adversary. Observing the assault, the mage grins and comments that it's rather impressive. He subsequently lifts his hand and starts to accumulate his own strength. With assurance, he proclaims that he will demonstrate the disparity in their caliber. From above, a colossal surge of energy descends upon the combat zone. Observing the approaching wave, one of the individuals alerts that the assault is imminent. The energy then rushes swiftly toward all individuals in the auditorium. Vaulting over the appendages, he readies for an airborne retaliatory strike. Gripping the blade with both hands, he readies a formidable strike. with an upward cut. He divides the colossal amount of energy into two parts. The strength of the collision propels the mercenaries away from the battle. Observing his assault fragment, the mage gazes intently at the fighter. Rebuffed by the blast, he fights to maintain his balance. He clarifies that this is not a commonplace blade, as it possesses celestial safeguarding. He subsequently discloses that his sword is, in fact, a weapon designed to counteract magic. Eagerly responding to this development, the mercenaries cry out the name of their commander. He wonders how his enchantment was shattered by a fighter devoid of any mystical abilities. He subsequently observes that the strength of the eastern clans is formidable. With a grin upon his visage, the magician remarks that this is all quite entertaining. He subsequently concocts a fresh incantation and inquires about his thoughts on it. Prepared to battle, the warrior summons his comrade's strike to progress alongside him. The wizard subsequently hurls multiple orbs of energy toward him. He protects himself with the blade, successfully parrying the approaching assaults. Astonished by the spectacle, the wizard commends his adversary's prowess. As he slices through the enchantment, he exclaims that it is painful, and the onslaught persists. It is subsequently clarified that to halt the enchantment, the ring must be obliterated. Discovering nothing in the vicinity, he understands that there is no enchanted circle. Perplexed, he ponders how this could occur without an expansive ring. From above, the magician inquires about what he seeks, stating that it's situated right there, observing. At the enchantress, the fighter ultimately comprehends the circumstance. Without delay, he springs with significant power toward the foe in midair. With a forceful roar, he flings his blade with all his strength. Astonished, the wizard ponders whether he cast the blade merely to strike. It soars aloft. The blade targets precisely the pendant light suspended from the ceiling. Upon observing the objective, the magician comprehends the scheme and is utterly astonished. With a precise strike causes the sword to obliterate the grand chandelier. Descending from the ceiling, it penetrates the enchanted circle concealed within. Upon striking the ground, the blade generates a tremendous eruption of arcane energy. Frantic, he shouts, inquiring about the fate of his enchanted circle. He continuously exclaims that he is unable to conjure enchantment, and that everything has come to an end. Altered in his demeanor, he grins and claims it was merely a jest. Despite lacking his armament, the fighter swiftly lunges towards the mage. He clarifies that he is capable of forming a more compact magical circle at any moment. Initiating an assault, he cautions that this is sufficient for an individual defenseless. Witnessing the assault, he shouts, reinitiating his monster collection once more. He then reaches out his hand, summoning once again for his blade, Moog Yule. However, on this occasion, the beast merely sinks its teeth into his arm with tremendous intensity. Devoid of the blade, he propels the beast itself towards the conjurer. Perplexed, the magician shouts at him to pause and cease his actions. Shouting for his demise, he lunges at his foe with all his might. Approaching swiftly, he delivers a forceful blow straight to the mage's visage. With the conclusive strike, the wizard entirely vanishes before him. The impact of the blow penetrates him and shatters the barrier at the rear of the chamber. He then understands he experienced no opposition when the strike made contact. Perplexed, he remains motionless, attempting to comprehend the events that have just unfolded. Shortly thereafter, numerous ebony feathers start to descend gradually from the ceiling. Gazing upward, he observes the magician departing and offering him a farewell. He subsequently shouts at the scoundrel to pause and not flee from the confrontation. Already distant, the raven claims it was enjoyable battling Attilla. He persists in stating that it is entertaining for a sorcerer to be vanquished by a mortal. However, abruptly, an object collides with the crow mid-air, prompting him to stretch out his hand. The fighter cautions that he will not permit him to flee. On the earth, the raven is pierced by a javelin that seemingly materializes from thin air. The lance subsequently starts to disintegrate the raven's form with its might. Upon witnessing this, he is astonished by the unforeseen twist of circumstances. As it faces obliteration, the crow emits a last cry of suffering and torment. As he faces his demise, the raven comprehends that the circumstances have become exceedingly dire for him. As he disintegrates, he cries out about the celestial relic that wounded him. Prior to the fighter, the mage's form ultimately dissipates entirely. Exhausted following the altercation, he contemplates whether he has truly triumphed over him at last. Following the sorcerer's conquest, the commanded warriors remain immobile. Gradually, they start to regain their awareness, inquiring about what transpired. One of the exuberantly rejoicing, the whole band of mercenaries exclaims that they have triumphed at last. Shortly thereafter, one of his associates rushes over to his supervisor to converse with him. Approaching closely, he expresses his discontent that the supervisor ought to have informed them regarding the blade, stating, he should be quiet. The supervisor states that he ought to have assisted instead. The hired soldier subsequently offers a justification, and the leader concedes that it was a perilous adversary. Gazing at his flank, the mercenary addresses him once more with apprehension. With a terrified demeanor, he shouts that his superior is hemorrhaging. Unable to endure any further, he ultimately succumbs and begins to tumble. Witnessing his employer collapse, the mercenary cries out his name in utter anguish. The setting transformations. And to a lady, he remarks that if Batory had not rescued him, he would have perished. Employing her enchantment on him, she responds that she didn't precisely rescue him. She subsequently clarifies that she is merely restoring a portion of his physique. While she communicates, she cradles a piece of his essence in her grasp to perpetuate the endeavor. Requesting that she not be so aloof, he brings to her attention that they are nearly identical. With a grin, he inquires if she was upset that he attempted to eliminate Attilla. Merely gazing at him, she emits a sound of utter disdain. Refusing. She is furious, and she hears him assert that she is. She subsequently acknowledges that she is, yet expresses that she also feels immensely appreciative. Elucidating her reasoning, she states that Attilla demonstrated his ability to master Mughal. Moreover, disclosing her scheme, she states that Attilla will dominate the globe through extensive carnage. And she finishes by asserting that he is the warrior who will realize their aspiration. As he is affectionately licked on the face, he mutters in irritation while gradually rousing from slumber in bed. Exasperated. Due to the circumstances, he expresses his dissatisfaction with the odor and urges his companion to cease. Immediately afterward, he sits upright and furiously calls out Punch's name. Surveying the space, he contemplates where he might find himself. At that moment, a dialogue box appears before him, featuring a crucial alert. Recalling the brawl, he claims he lost consciousness immediately after vanquishing the crow. Subsequently, a fresh window emerges, notifying him that it will bestow his accolades. Perusing the details, he recognizes that he has acquired a party framework and an ability. Evaluating the newfound authority, he ponders whether the fighter's shout is powerful. Self-assured, he surmises that the ability he acquired will be the most formidable of all. In a moment of triumph, he proclaims his intention to conquer the crow. Yet the system alerts him that it remains alive. A recounting clarifies that it does not perish merely from having its head severed. He subsequently asserts that, as the creator, he possesses the most comprehensive understanding of that reality. Abruptly, a sound from beyond draws his attention to the bedroom entrance. Upon entering the chamber, the mercenary inquires in astonishment if the leader is already alert. He subsequently instructs his fellow associate to summon everyone at once. Noticing his distress, the supervisor inquires of Otto what transpired. Upon arriving shortly thereafter, the other contractors inquire about the boss's well-being. Rejoicing, they proclaim that the leader has returned from the dead, yet he asserts that he never perished. Thus, the genuine architect, Laurent, was ultimately apprehended for his betrayal. Saxon subsequently attained the title of the new Duke of the Gascony region. At the pub, the hired guns rejoice and clink glasses with their bounty. Raising a glass with his superior, he remarks that the battle has at long last concluded. Inquisitive, the hired gun inquires with the leader regarding his objectives for the forthcoming period. At that moment, Saxon enters the tavern and formally requests the presence of Lord Attilla. He inquires whether his body is improving, stating that he is well. He expresses gratitude to Saxon for permitting him to recuperate. Saxon. He subsequently declares that he has delivered the items he had assured them. Upon glimpsing the treasure chest, he remarks that he has eagerly anticipated this moment. Perceiving it as unjust, a mercenary expresses dissatisfaction, asserting that the leader shouldn't claim everything for himself. Glancing at his comrades, he readies himself to provide a compelling retort. He's chortling at the circumstance. Saxon discloses that the trunk holds the title to the land. Perplexed by the disclosure, they inquire about which region he is referring to. He subsequently verifies that he will convey everything straight to Sir Otto. Incapable. To trust what he's listening to, Otto inquires whether the present is genuinely intended for him. Indicating his companion, he asserts that the domain now belongs entirely to him. Overwhelmingly thrilled, Otto inquires if he can regain his nobility. Soon after, they raise their glasses in celebration, exclaiming, Long live Lord Attilla. Once the celebration concludes, the evening remains tranquil beyond the inn. The following day, he departs solitary on his steed towards the metropolis, listening. His associate mutters, stating he has no alternative at this point. He believes that henceforth he will battle adversaries using mystical abilities. He deduces that forsaking Otto and the others was the correct choice. With a solemn expression, he gets ready for the forthcoming expedition. After traveling for a short while, he pivots upon detecting a sound from the rear. Close behind him, Otto trails, calling out for him to pause. Astonished, he merely gazes as his companion swiftly nears along the trail. Mounted. With a grin, Otto continues to chuckle as he approaches nearer and nearer. Lifting his hand, Otto bellows at the top of his lungs that he is on his way. Reflecting on the past, he merely observes Otto advancing on his steed. Irritated, he inquires whether Otto is still inebriated from the previous night's celebration. Refuting the claim, Otto asserts that he would delegate all responsibilities to his subordinates during his time as a noble. He subsequently asserts with pride that his absence poses no issue. Growing impatient, he asserts that their agreement has ended, and he is no longer obligated to pursue him. Halting, Otto expresses that initially he detested his superior. Perplexed, based on what he perceives, he inquires about his recent statement. However, Otto articulates that, regardless of the circumstances, he consistently safeguarded everyone. He proceeds, stating that he granted rank and land to erstwhile outlaws. He concludes by expressing his desire to explore more of the globe alongside him. Upon listening to the address, he merely believes his companion has truly lost his mind. Subsequently, he observes Otto grasping an umbrella and inquires about its purpose. The diminutive being perched on his shoulder also ponders his actions. Weary of the circumstance, he merely exhales and resumes his trek along the path. Observing his companion continue, he declares that he is free to do as he pleases. With an extremely joyful expression, Otto exclaims that he has at last obtained what he desired. He subsequently inquires with the supervisor about what their forthcoming destination will be. Departing from Gascony, they journey alongside one another, with Otto calling out just behind him. The account reveals that he presently journeys alongside a chevalier and a bear. Throughout the meadows, Otto calls out, requesting him to at least disclose their destination. Shifting settings, the narrative centers on the abode of the Lord of Aquitaine. Positioned at the entrance, the sentinels perceive a voice requesting them to hold on for a moment. Within, a warrior challenges the notion of introducing a killer to this place. In astonishment, he pounds the table and exclaims that it is unfeasible. He subsequently yells in fury, proclaiming that the individual took the life of his associate, Ruach. Perched, the chief proclaims that Attilla triumphed over him, and his might is indubitable. He goes on to elaborate that Attilla would serve as a valuable addition to their alliance. Nonetheless, the knight exclaims that he is unable to accept that determination in any way. Upon this, the leader proclaims he will capture him following his triumph in battle. He subsequently discloses that alongside Attilla, he has the potential to grow even more powerful. Astonished. Upon the disclosure, the knight merely gazes at his commander in silence. Transitioning into the woodland, the knight collapses as their expedition advances. Concealed among the foliage, an enigmatic gaze observes the pair with keen interest. While they dine by the bonfire, an enormous serpent strikes and, Otto shouts. Without pausing his repast, he effortlessly seizes the creature by the throat. Immediately afterward, he hurls the being effortlessly into the distance. Concerned, Otto inquires whether they might opt for a more secure path. He responds that they are set to vanquish a sorcerer, thus safety is inconsequential. Otto subsequently inquires whether the Crow Lord is indeed alive, and he verifies it. Reaching out his hand, he requests Punch to hand him the Muhita blade. At that moment, the tiny being assists him in searing the serpent over the flames. Abruptly, the Mugio blade starts to respond with a formidable energy. Perceiving the blade's response, he springs up, startling Otto. Furthermore, the system identifies the observer's mystical energy. In reality, it then clarifies that Muhil has internalized the force and determined its destiny. Abruptly pivoting, he surprises Otto, who inquires about what just occurred. He subsequently reveals that the morsel of meat on the skewer is charred. Holding the charred meat, Otto laments that his meal is entirely spoiled. Perched by the bonfire, they persist in dining serenely amidst the woods. Now more composed, Otto savors a fresh morsel of meat effortlessly. Alongside him, his supervisor and the emblematic character also persist with their meal. Unbeknownst to them, a colossal being observes all from the concealment of the foliage. carrying. With its fangs bared, the colossal wolf gazes fixedly at the pair. Momentarily, a group of wolves races toward the campfire. Observing the group advance, Otto shrieks in terror at the menace. He considers it peculiar, as wolves ought not to have departed from the woods. At that moment, a system window emerges, presenting a task to vanquish the group. Accompanying the task, he envisions the conjurer orchestrating everything from behind the scenes, becoming aware. It's a scheme. He speculates on what the sorcerer is scheming at this moment. Beside him, Otto draws his blade, prepared for combat. Brandishing his armament, he readies himself to confront the looming danger. Noticing his companion immobilized, he shouts and instructs him to prepare. Subsequently, he cautions that an assault is imminent and instructs Otto to eliminate one. He then offers a faint grin, assured in his strategy for the confrontation. In a state of turmoil, Otto exclaims that it's impossible for him to confront the creature. Advising him to cease his grievances, he asserts that Otto will be all right. Subsequently, the party framework emerges, inquiring if he wishes to establish a party. He's subpowering. Initially, Otto assaults one of the wolves with a forceful blow. Following the assault, he halts briefly, gasping from the exertion of battle. Safeguarding. In opposition to the assault, Otto succeeds in halting the wolf's progression with his blade. Immediately afterward, he delivers several additional direct strikes to the creature. He then becomes aware that he is indeed able to contend, and ponders whether he possesses strength. Evading the assault, he leaps to the side to prevent being ensnared. Subsequently, he emits a forceful shout and readies himself for a retaliatory strike. Rushing, the wolf is cast aside and collapses, vanquished. Following his triumph, he displays a self-assured grin at the result of the match. He reassures himself that he has triumphed over challenging circumstances and resolves to assist his employer. In the meantime, his superior conquers a wolf merely by treading on it. Without hesitating, he seizes another wolf and whirls it around to confront the others. With a forceful action, he flings the beast into the remainder of the group. During the battle with the wolves, he suddenly bursts into uncontrollable laughter. Observing the spectacle, Otto perceives his superior as more of a fiend than the genuine creatures themselves. Engaging with the wolves, he delivers a precise strike to the colossal beast. Upon vanquishing the group, he remains motionless with a grave demeanor. He subsequently reflects that, fortunately, the adversary was merely a wolf. The account elucidates that creatures in this realm are dissimilar to those found in manga and anime. In a rapid motion, he rushes towards a subsequent foe in the woodland. Achieving a strike, he showcases an intensity that surpasses the ordinary, without allowing it a moment to respond. Observing this, the formidable alpha wolf emits a powerful growl. As he readies an assault, he fixes the beast with an intense glare, filled with rage. Glancing to the side, he calls out for his ally Punch to enter the fray. Responding to the summons, the Punch charges in and assaults the colossal wolf. Following the triumph over the wolf, Punch ascends in skill and rejoices in the conquest. In the meantime, he merely observes Otto combat his own wolf. At that moment, the system declares that the party enhancements are now operational. Observing the battle, he recognizes that his companion is performing exceptionally well. Prepared for battle, he declares that the moment has arrived to conclude this. With a grin, he proclaims that there remains just one adversary to conquer. Observing the circumstances, the final wolf attempts to flee by dashing into the woods. Springing forward to strike, he proclaims that he will not allow the beast to flee. Perched upon the wolf, he prepares his decisive strike with the axe, but the chain encircles meticulously around the grip of his axe. The axe is wrenched free, allowing the wolf to flee. The strength of the collision propels Otto a considerable distance, and he yells in astonishment. At this moment, grasping the chain, he ponders whether Caspi has at last arrived. Gazing into the woods, he ponders who the adversary might be. As the link withdraws into the forest, he commends his rival's keen insight. Soon thereafter, the link starts to be drawn back in. Swiftly, he coils the chain around his arm to prevent it from escaping. Emerging from the forest, a voice cautions that they will eliminate him without him ever discovering their identity. Grasping the link securely, he states that, regarding their designation, he discloses his prior knowledge, referring to him as Saba of the Chain Scythe. Emerging from the gloom, Saba is observed gripping his armament in the heart of the woodland. Concealed among the foliage, he fixes his gaze upon his objective with a stern demeanor. Grasping the chain, he remains motionless, anticipating the adversary's subsequent action. He subsequently recognizes him as Saba, one of the 7 elite killers. Abruptly, Saba rapidly launches another chain weapon towards him. The assault brings the axe down onto the earth, blade first. With a swift jab, he redirects the chain, heading towards him. Springing into the fray, Saba ultimately reveals himself from his concealment in the woods. Observing his response, Saba is astonished and is unable to comprehend what transpired. At that moment, the tiny being perched on his shoulder emits a piercing roar. Retrieving his firearm, he states it's acceptable to proceed. He subsequently instructs Punch to proceed and assist their ally Otto. Now solitary, he contemplates whether they ought to evaluate that additional aptitude as well. Balling his hand into a fist, he readies himself for the impending battle. With a strike to the earth, he releases a formidable surge of power. Surrounded by the energy, he prepares to employ his newfound ability. With a powerful bellow, he ultimately unleashes Warrior's Roar. At that instant, the system declares that the collective's power and endurance have heightened. From the depths of the woodland, a shriek reverberates, capturing the notice of all. In combat with the wolf, Otto perceives the voice and identifies his superior. In another arena, Otto now confronts a novel and enigmatic opponent. With nimbleness, he evades the adversary's strikes and successfully retaliates. While he engages in combat, he observes that his adversary has become more manageable. Astonished by his might, she inquires whether he had been concealing his abilities. Rushing toward him, she delivers a rapid blow in his direction. With a nimble maneuver, she evades beneath him and disrupts his equilibrium. Leaping onto his back, she incapacitates him with an accurate strike. With her blade poised at his throat, she cautions him that this is the conclusion. Unexpectedly, Punch materializes and darts at full velocity toward the adversary. In a swift motion, she withdraws considerably from her adversary. Subsequently, Otto advances towards Punch with a grin, prepared to assist. Observing from afar, she simply gazes at the cluster, remaining motionless in the heart of the woods. She then reflects inwardly that they possess great strength, just as her mentor had indicated. In another location, he battles Saba, wielding his chain scythe. With a forceful strike, Saba propels his armament towards his adversary. Yet with nimbleness, he evades the assault, employing his own armament for self-defense. As he maneuvers, he persistently scrutinizes the adversary's actions. Utilizing his chain, Saba initiates an assault that propels numerous duplicates through the air. Following the assault, he halts briefly to regain his breath from the confrontation. Confronting one another, the pair glower at each other before the subsequent action. He subsequently inquires whether the mentor is concerned about his student in her battle. Without responding, Saba merely shifts her position slightly and observes. He subsequently states that Attilla subdued Caspi, yet ultimately spared her life. Furious, Saba exclaims that he has perceived the vile essence of his sinister heart. Not. Lacking any comprehension, he merely gazes with a bewildered demeanor. Saba fixates on the combatant gradually nearing him. He subsequently clarifies that, should he falter, Caspi will become the organization's subsequent objective. With his eyelids shut, he persists in absorbing the details he has recently encountered. With a grin, he engages the mental vision capability to scrutinize. Indignant, Saba declares he will not pardon the monster who had the audacity to assault Caspi. With a subtle grin, he ultimately comprehends the entire circumstance. He subsequently clarifies that assassins typically struggle against fighters. Assassins typically strive for a solitary blow and thereafter escape to anticipate their subsequent opportunity. However, Saba revealed himself and faced him head-on on the field of combat. The account culminates in the assertion that his emotions for his apprentice drove him to insanity. He subsequently grins, readying himself to take advantage of this vulnerability in his adversary. Rushing into the fray, Otto sprints toward his adversary. He subsequently realizes that he was unaware Saba was such a reckless individual. While he safeguards against the assault, he becomes aware that in this condition of fury, in a swift motion, he seizes Saba's hand and neutralizes him. Without delay, he energetically propels him skyward. He subsequently determines that he can triumph effortlessly if he remains cautious regarding that. Collapsing to the earth, Saba gathers his composure and readies himself for his subsequent action. Vaulting backward, he casts his chain to establish some space. Yet abruptly, he materializes directly behind Saba, taking him off guard. Astonished, Saba ponders how he arrived there so quickly. With a swift strike, he launches an onslaught that Saba successfully evades. Lacking. Despite losing steam, he continues to progress, diminishing the gap separating them. Irritated, Saba ponders why he consistently remains a step in front. With a strike, he delivers a blow. Saba's armament, propelling it through the air. Impact. Saba is propelled backward by the strength of the intense collision. At that moment, his axe starts to interact with the chain of the weapon. Observing. During the assault, Saba recognizes that he anticipated every one of his maneuvers. On the earth, he places a hand to prevent himself from collapsing entirely. Reclining on the surface, Saba resolves that he must employ his ultimate option at this moment. With a resolute demeanor, he declares that he has no alternative but to employ it. Subsequently, he lunges with utmost intensity at the fighter. Shouting in rage, experiencing the strain, he acknowledges the killer's supreme maneuver with a grin. Drawing near, Saba lands a decisive strike to the fighter's torso. With a powerful exclamation, he discloses the title of his obliteration method. Observing the assault, he merely offers a subtle grin without wavering. Following the assault, the woodland becomes hushed for a fleeting instant. Remaining upright, Saba releases a formidable force from his tightly shut hand. Breathless, he contemplates whether he has ultimately succeeded in vanquishing his adversary. Yet abruptly, his adversary materializes directly behind him, entirely unscathed. Astonished, Saba is left speechless, witnessing that his assault has failed. He subsequently inquires whether Saba is attempting to squander his existence. Apprehensive about the circumstances, Saba merely gazes at him, his forehead glistening with perspiration. Staring at the woodland, he readies himself to depart the combat zone. Consequently, he and his adversary swiftly escape the vicinity in unison. Upon perceiving the sound, he contemplates whether anyone is nearby. Rising, he merely mutters and observes the woods carefully. Rewinding a little, Otto is battling both Caspi and Punch simultaneously. With a yell, Caspi lunges ahead, slashing multiple times with her blades. Retaliating vocally, Otto successfully fends off all the incoming assaults. Observing his power, Caspi ponders how events unfolded in this manner. During the altercation, Caspi perceives an unusual sound emanating from the woodland behind her. Spotting a gap, Otto shouts that this is the moment to strike. Springing in her direction, he strikes with a formidable slash of his blade. Irritated, she mutters under her breath as she struggles to fend off his unexpected assault. Abruptly, Saba materializes before her and absorbs the blow on her behalf. In a protective position, Otto scarcely succeeds in parrying Saba's assault. Observing the spectacle, Caspi is astonished by the recent occurrence. Rushing to her supervisor, she exclaims to him, concerned about his health. Lacking comprehension, she merely observes him with an astonished expression. Summoning her attention, Saba gets ready to deliver his concluding directives. She then indicates that for a period, she must accompany those individuals. With no alternative, Caspi reluctantly consents to his mentor's command. Observing his pupil, Saba maintains silence for a fleeting instant. Subsequently, he pivots and starts to meander slowly away from the vicinity. As he departs, Saba offers a parting gesture to his protege. Dissolving into the darkness, he instructs Caspi to endure all challenges. As she observed her mentor depart, she simply shouted his name, her expression brimming with concern. Abruptly, a beacon ignites amidst the shadows of the nocturnal woodland. Soon after, a band of warriors appears at the location, brandishing their torches. Observing the skirmish before them, one of the knights glances at his commander. With a grave demeanor, the crimson-haired knight verifies the details. On the terrain, numerous massive wolves rest entirely motionless. Gazing at the spectacle, the chief displays a contented grin. He subsequently inquires whether he truly vanquished all the wolves on his own. Irritated, he inquires how often he must reiterate his point. Furiously, the knight exclaims that he cannot comprehend such absurdity. He subsequently remarks with a grin that he is not obliged to accept it, if he prefers not to. Confronting one another, the pair gazes intently, filled with anticipation. From afar, a voice cries out, summoning its master amidst the woods. Navigating out of the woodland, Otto and Caspi dash toward Attilla. Observing Otto alongside Caspi, he inquires why he is accompanied by her. From a distance, he merely observes the two of them gradually draw near. Irritated, Caspi exclaims that her name is Caspi, not that object. Indicating. With his blade drawn, the knight inquires about their identities and associations. He encounters the crimson-haired warrior who challenges him. Inquiring about his identity, Attilla casts a scornful look in his direction. Upon that, the other knights exclaimed for him to recognize his position. He subsequently identifies Arno, the offspring of Margrave Heinrich Stephan. Advancing, Otto presents himself as the Baron of Beltron. The Chevaliers speculate whether he is the celebrated warrior Otto, yet one among them observes that he resembles a mere miscreant more than a hero. Arno subsequently states that if he is Otto, he must possess the insignia. indicating. With his blade in hand, he readies himself to face the assembly. He subsequently cautions that they will not evade the offense of masquerading as heroes. Rushing towards the assembly, a knight shouts for Lord Arno. As he approaches, he mentions that he possesses a significant document to present. He subsequently murmurs the details into Arno's ear, rendering him solemn. Upon receiving the report, Arno's demeanor shifts, and he grows concerned. Consequently, he alerts the team that the circumstance is a crisis. Confronting Otto, he insists that he demonstrate his power if it is truly him. From afar, Otto and Caspi observe the circumstance with grave countenances. Resting on his shoulder, the diminutive being scowls at all with immense fury. Brandishing his blade, he labels him a murderer and confronts him boldly.